Across deserts, oceans, and forgotten cities stand the silent giants of our past. Statues too massive, too perfect to belong to the hands of their age. Were they monuments to gods or memories of something far older? Each stone seems to whisper that history is not what we think it is. Join us as we uncover the lost megastructures of ancient Earth. And before we begin, they say those who subscribe awaken the giants once more. The Christ of the Abyss. Beneath the rolling blue of the Ligurian Sea, where sunlight scatters like glass shards through the waves, a figure stands, arms open, face lifted toward the surface, watching the world above. It is not a coral formation or a forgotten ruin. It is a statue, a man of bronze, 8 feet tall, Christ of the Abyss. For decades, divers who descend into this quiet gulf near San Frutuoso speak of the same thing, a moment when the murky green clears, and the form of a human appears from the darkness, as though rising, not sinking. And in that strange stillness, surrounded by silence and salt, they say it feels almost alive. But behind this haunting image lies a story of remembrance and of an extraordinary experiment in underwater preservation. The idea for Christ of the Abyss began not in the depths, but on the surface. In 1947, when Italian diver Dario Gonzatti lost his life while exploring the same sea that now holds the statue. Gonzatti was one of Italy's pioneering scuba divers, working alongside the legendary Duilio Marconte, a man often called the father of modern diving. Marconte, devastated by the loss, envisioned a memorial that could live in the element his friend loved most, beneath the sea. A monument that wouldn't sit in stone halls or on distant hills, but one that would share the stillness of the deep, where time moves slower and memory doesn't fade. By 1954, the dream took form. Sculptor Guido Galletti, working with bronze recovered from naval propellers and church bells, shaped the statue, a Christ not of suffering, but of peace, offering a silent blessing to all who entered his underwater world. On August 22, 1954, Italian naval divers and fishermen gathered at San Frutuoso Bay. A barge carried the massive statue, weighing over 2 tons, out into the calm water. There, engineers lowered it carefully onto a concrete base, 40 feet below the surface, and for the first time, a man-made monument was placed permanently underwater. For years, only a few divers knew of its existence. But as scuba technology advanced, the site became a pilgrimage for those who sought something more than adventure. Even through the thick green haze, the statue's open arms seemed to radiate welcome, a gesture to the sea, to the living, and to those who never returned from its depths. But time, as always, began to leave its mark. By the 1990s, corrosion, marine growth, and storms had worn away parts of the statue. Salt had eaten into the bronze, and algae had painted it green. For many, that decay only added to its haunting beauty, the merging of man and nature, art and abyss. Yet conservators saw a warning. In 2003, the Italian Navy launched an ambitious effort to bring Christ of the Abyss back to the surface, but only for a brief resurrection. Using air balloons and diving cranes, they lifted the statue after nearly 50 years underwater. For the first time since 1954, sunlight touched its face again. Engineers and restorers cleaned the metal, stabilized the corrosion, and returned it to the sea. And when the statue was lowered again, renewed but still weathered, the divers who watched said it felt like watching a ritual, a second descent, a reminder that memory, like faith, is something you keep returning to. But here's where the story widens. Since that first installation in Italy, Christ of the Abyss has been replicated, not once but around the world. In 1961, a bronze cast was placed off the coast of Grenada, deep in the Caribbean. In 1965, another replica was submerged in Key Largo, Florida, in the warm waters of the Atlantic. Each statue carries the same pose, the same expression, but each has its own silence, its own community of coral, light, and time. These statues became more than memorials. They became experiments in underwater heritage, how human-made relics age beneath the ocean, and what stories marine life can tell through their decay. Marine archaeologists studying the Italian original found that the currents and sea chemistry created a protective layer over the bronze, effectively freezing the corrosion in certain zones, while coral and anemones covered others in living skin. It's not just a statue anymore, it's a hybrid, part sculpture, part reef. Yet beneath the beauty, there's something even deeper. The placement of Christ of the Abyss was not random. The Bay of San Frutuoso sits between Portofino and Camogli, areas known for ancient shipwrecks and medieval trading routes. Historical divers have discovered fragments of amphorae, anchors, and hulls scattered across the seabed, relics of Roman, Byzantine, and Genoese ships lost centuries ago. Some believe the placement of the statue, right above this historic corridor, was a symbolic act, a guardian watching over all the sailors and divers who never returned. Others, more practically, suggest it marks a zone of maritime research, a blend of memory and monitoring, an underwater lab where engineers can study how artifacts survive over decades. Today, nearly 70 years later, Christ of the Abyss remains one of Italy's most famous underwater landmarks. Every diver who visits describes a similar sensation, descending through the cold, green light until the figure appears, rising like a ghost from the seafloor, its arms stretched in silent welcome. Schools of fish drift through the open space around it, sometimes forming rings, as if orbiting a relic. Crabs crawl across its base. Rays of sunlight flicker on its head, like candlelight in a cathedral. Down there, 40 feet below, the boundary between sacred and scientific disappears. It's not just a statue anymore. It's a story, a memory of invention, loss, and the human need to leave something behind, even where no one can see it. And maybe that's why the Christ of the Abyss continues to fascinate. Because it reminds us that even in the most silent depths we build monuments not just to remember the dead, but to prove that faith, art, and science can coexist beneath the same waves. As the tides move, as the coral grows, as divers continue to descend, the statue stands unmoved, hands raised, watching the light above, a guardian of everything the sea has taken, and everything it still hides. The winged bulls of Nineveh. Nineveh, Iraq, beneath the dust of northern Iraq, in a land where rivers once glowed under the light of ancient empires. Giants sleep, half man, half beast, their wings stretched in eternal silence. They are the Lamassu, the guardian spirits of Nineveh, and for nearly 3,000 years they have watched over the ruins of a forgotten empire. When modern archaeologists first uncovered their colossal forms in the mid-19th century, the world could hardly believe what had been found. Carved from single blocks of limestone, standing over 14 feet tall, and weighing many tons, these creatures were unlike anything known before. They had the body of a bull, the wings of an eagle, and the calm, all-seeing face of a man. But behind their beauty lay an engineering mystery. How did an empire over 2,000 years before Christ carve, move, and raise such impossible stone guardians? To understand the Lamassu, we must go back to a time when Nineveh was the beating heart of the Assyrian Empire. Around the 7th century BCE, this city stood as the most powerful metropolis in the world, a capital of kings, scholars, and conquerors. Its walls stretched for miles, enclosing grand temples, palaces, and gardens. Its libraries held clay tablets inscribed with the earliest known stories, including the Epic of Gilgamesh, the world's first recorded epic. And at the gates of its palaces stood the Lamassu, each one carved not just as decoration, but as living symbols of divine protection. Every visitor, every trader, every captive brought before the Assyrian king would have passed beneath their gaze. The Lamassu were placed at gateways, each positioned with precise alignment, facing outward, guardians between the mortal and divine. Their forms were not random, every feature had meaning. The bull's body for strength, the eagle's wings for speed, the human face for intelligence, and the horned crown, the mark of divinity. But what astonished modern archaeologists was not only their size, it was their mathematical precision. Each Lamassu was carved with 5 legs, not 4, a design that made it appear still when viewed from the front, and walking when seen from the side. This duality, motion and stillness in one sculpture, showed a level of artistic sophistication and geometric understanding rarely seen even in later civilizations. When Austin Henry Layard, a young British explorer, began excavating near Mosul in 1849, he was searching for nothing more than traces of ancient ruins. What he found instead changed history. As his team dug deeper, the ground began to reveal the outlines of massive doorways and winged forms buried under centuries of earth. Then, one morning, the dust gave way to the stone face of the first Lamassu, serene, monumental, eyes open as if it had only been asleep. The discovery stunned Europe. Newspapers called it the awakening of giants. The statues were carefully lifted and transported, a feat that required immense effort to the British Museum, where they still stand today. But not all of them left Iraq. Many remained beneath the soil, and some still lie buried under the ruins of Nineveh, their wings encased in the same clay that once formed the foundations of a great empire. Yet even in their broken state, the Lamassu continue to speak. Their inscriptions, carved into the stone in cuneiform script, tell of protection, power, and cosmic order. "I am the protector of the king," one reads. "I drive away evil and guard the threshold." Archaeologists soon realized that these creatures were not simply mythic guardians, they represented a worldview. To the Assyrians, the universe was a battlefield between order and chaos, and every palace, every wall, every gate needed guardians from the unseen. Modern studies of the Lamassu have revealed that they were placed according to complex principles of sacred geometry. Their orientation matched solar and stellar alignments, their dimensions often related to mathematical ratios, the same patterns found later in Greek temples and even Gothic cathedrals. This precision suggests a knowledge of both astronomy and engineering that far exceeded what many believed ancient Mesopotamians possessed. But Nineveh's story did not end in grandeur, it ended in fire. In 612 BCE, an alliance of Babylonians, Medes and Scythians laid siege to the city. For months, the sky over Nineveh glowed red. When the walls finally fell, flames swept through the palaces, collapsing ceilings and burying everything beneath rubble and ash. The Lamassu, once shining white in the sun, were shattered and entombed. The empire vanished, and with it the memory of the winged guardians faded into myth. For over 2,000 years, the ruins lay forgotten. Villagers built homes over the mounds without knowing what lay below. Even the name Nineveh slipped from living memory, until the 19th century rediscovery. And yet, in a strange way, the Lamassu had done their duty. They had survived. Today, Nineveh's buried gatehouses continue to yield new secrets. Ground-penetrating radar has revealed more chambers beneath the ancient citadel. In 2018, archaeologists uncovered a previously unknown Assyrian relief. Intricate carvings showing kings, stars, and gods, a reminder that the city still hides layers untouched since antiquity. But perhaps the most haunting chapter came recently, when conflict once again touched the ruins. In 2015, extremist groups attacked the ancient city, destroying statues, carvings, and relics with drills and explosives. The world watched in horror as the same Lamassu that had survived millennia of war and erosion were reduced to fragments. Yet, out of that tragedy came a new determination. Archaeologists and digital preservationists began a massive effort to scan, reconstruct, and restore the destroyed monuments using 3D technology. What was lost in stone was reborn in light, ensuring that even if the original guardians fall, their legacy will endure in virtual space. Standing in front of one of the restored Lamassu today, whether in Baghdad, London, or Mosul, it's impossible not to feel their presence. They are both art and architecture, history and mythology. They remind us that civilizations rise and fall, but their symbols, their stories, and their mysteries endure. Look closely into their eyes, and you might see something deeper, a reflection of our own need to guard what we love, to build monuments that outlast our brief years. The Assyrians carved theirs from limestone. We preserve ours in data and memory. But the impulse is the same. Nineveh may have fallen, but the winged bulls still stand, not just as relics of empire, but as guardians of human legacy. Their wings, forever open, carry the weight of millennia, a whisper from the ancient world that power fades but creation endures. And somewhere beneath the sands of northern Iraq, more still wait. Silent, immense, their wings folded in the earth, dreaming of the day sunlight will touch their faces once more. The giant sculptures of Musa, Cancun, Mexico, underwater. Beneath the turquoise waters off the coast of Cancun, Mexico, lies a world where art and ocean merge, where human faces stare back through coral and current, and statues whisper through the sea. This is Musa, the Museo Subaquático de Arte, or the Underwater Museum of Art, a place where hundreds of life-size sculptures rest silently on the ocean floor, slowly becoming part of a living reef. At first glance, Musa looks like something ancient, as if the remains of a lost civilization had been discovered beneath the waves. Rows of stone figures stand in stillness, some buried in sand, others cloaked in coral and algae. Faces eroded by salt water seem to express a quiet melancholy, while others look peaceful, almost meditative, as fish drift lazily through their hollow eyes. But this is not the ruin of a fallen city. It is a creation of the modern age, one of the most ambitious underwater art projects ever conceived. The story of Musa begins not with artists, but with the ocean itself, or more precisely, with the crisis facing the Mesoamerican Barrier Reef, the second largest coral reef system in the world. By the early 2000s, parts of the reef near Cancun were dying. Years of pollution, hurricanes, and human interference had left vast stretches of coral bleached and broken. Divers, drawn by Cancun's clear waters and vivid marine life, were unknowingly contributing to the problem. Thousands of fins brushing against fragile coral each year, accelerating the reef's decline. Marine biologist Jaime González Cano, director of the Cancun National Marine Park, faced an impossible question. How do you protect something so beautiful when the very people who come to admire it are the ones destroying it? The answer came in the form of an artist, Jason DeCaires Taylor, a British sculptor and diver known for merging art and ecology beneath the sea. Together, they envisioned something radical: to build an entire museum underwater, not just for humans to see, but for nature to inhabit. In 2009, the project began. Divers and marine engineers scouted the sandy seabed between Cancun and Isla Mujeres, a calm stretch of ocean with gentle currents and clear visibility. Then, piece by piece, they began lowering life-size sculptures into the depths. Figures of men, women, children, even cars and houses were placed in silent rows. The first installation, called the Silent Evolution, featured over 400 statues, each modeled from real people: fishermen, teachers, mothers, and children from nearby communities. At first, they stood clean and pale, gray shapes against the blue, but over time the ocean claimed them. Coral polyps settled into their pores, sponges grew across their shoulders, schools of fish wove between them. What began as sculpture transformed into living reef. Scientists soon noticed something remarkable. The statues were made of a special pH-neutral marine concrete, designed not to harm marine life, but to encourage it. Within months, new coral species began to colonize their surfaces. Algae covered their forms in green and gold, while barnacles dotted their faces like freckles. The MUSA sculptures became habitats, homes for fish, crustaceans, and tiny creatures that build the base of ocean ecosystems. Each piece tells a story. One of the most haunting is the banker, a group of men in suits, heads buried in sand, a silent commentary on denial and greed. Another, the dream collector, shows a man clutching bottles, each containing a human face, a meditation on memory and loss. Others, like Man on Fire, depict figures engulfed in coral growth, symbolizing both destruction and rebirth. When viewed together, they feel ancient, as if a civilization had been frozen mid-thought and placed beneath the sea. But there's more to mountainsides than art or environmental engineering. It taps into something older, a human instinct to leave a mark, to build monuments even in the most unlikely places. Just as ancient Egyptians carved temples in stone and Polynesians raised statues from volcanic rock, mountainsides creators shaped their legacy from sand and sea. Diving among the statues feels like drifting through time. Light filters down through the water, dappling the figures with rippling gold. Silence dominates, broken only by the faint crackle of coral and the hum of distant currents. Some statues have become so encrusted with coral that their original features are barely visible. Others remain almost untouched, as if time has chosen to spare them. Yet, for all its calm beauty, mountainsides also raises deep questions. How long will these sculptures last? What happens when art and nature collide? When coral overtakes human forms, erasing faces, softening edges, reclaiming what was once man-made? Scientists estimate that, over decades, the ocean will consume much of mountainsides installations, turning them into natural reef systems indistinguishable from their surroundings. And that's exactly the point. Mountainsides was never meant to last forever. It was designed to disappear, to remind us that everything we build eventually returns to nature. Its quiet message is one of humility, that human art, no matter how grand, is only a guest in the world of the sea. The museum now spans over 500 sculptures, spread across multiple sites and depths. Some lie shallow enough for snorkelers to glimpse from above, others rest deep, accessible only to divers. Each location has developed its own unique marine community, a different palette of coral, a different rhythm of life. In less than 2 decades, MUSA has become not just an ecological success story, but a symbol of harmony between creativity and conservation. But perhaps the most powerful thing about MUSA is how it changes perception. When divers emerge from its depths, they often describe the same feeling, that the boundary between life and art, between human and nature, has blurred. The ocean, once seen as something to visit, now feels like something to protect. And that's the true magic of the underwater giants of Cancun. They are not ancient idols, nor lost relics. They are mirrors, reflecting the choices we make, the damage we cause, and the hope we still have. As the world's oceans warm and reefs continue to vanish, MUSA stands as both a warning and a promise. A reminder that even in the face of loss, creation can still bloom beneath the waves. If you swim close enough, you can see it happening in real time. Coral tendrils curling around stone fingers, tiny fish darting through hollow eyes, nature's slow and patient hand transforming art into life. In the end, the giant sculptures of MUSA are not monuments of the past, but monuments of becoming, living testaments to the idea that even beneath the weight of human error, beauty can grow again. And somewhere beneath the warm Mexican Sea, surrounded by silence and light, 1,000 stone faces continue their silent evolution, forever watching, forever changing, as the ocean writes its story across them. The colossal figures of Arsamea, Turkey, rock relief. High in the mountains of southeastern Turkey, overlooking the deep valleys of the Euphrates, there lies a forgotten city carved from living stone, a place of kings, gods, and messages meant for eternity. This is Arsamea, the ancient royal seat of the kingdom of Commagene. Here, on the steep cliffs of Mount Nemrut's lesser-known twin, massive stone figures stand guard, their features weathered but defiant, their silence stretching across millennia. Few travelers come here now. The wind moves through the ruins like a whisper, carrying with it the scent of earth and ancient dust. But in the time of King Antiochus I, Theos, over 2,000 years ago, this place was sacred ground, a bridge between the living and the divine. The colossal rock reliefs of Arsamea were more than monuments, they were messages carved in stone, declarations of power and faith that merged human ambition with heavenly order. When archaeologists first rediscovered these towering reliefs in the early 20th century, they were struck by their scale and mystery. Gigantic stone kings clasped hands with gods in gestures of eternal unity, not in battle or worship, but in equality. It was unlike anything found elsewhere in the Hellenistic world. These carvings, some over 8 meters tall, showed a ruler standing beside figures of divine beings, Zeus, Apollo, and Mithras, their hands joined in a sacred handshake known as the Dexiosis. It was a symbol of divine sanction, a declaration that man and God were bound together in eternal alliance. The most imposing of these is the Dexiosis relief of Antiochus and Heracles, carved into the cliff face itself. Even after centuries of erosion, the detail is mesmerizing. You can see the folds of their garments, the solemn expression on their faces, and the faint outlines of an inscription that once proclaimed the king's divine ancestry. Antiochus, ruler of Commagene in the 1st century BCE, believed himself to be descended from both the Persian kings of old and the bloodline of Alexander the Great. Through this lineage, he claimed not only the right to rule, but the right to stand among gods. Arsamea was his sanctuary, his royal cult center. The carvings here were not just decoration, they were part of a larger message, one that fused East and West, myth and memory, stone and spirit. The kingdom of Commagene lay at the crossroads of empires, between the Greeks to the west and the Persians to the east. Antiochus saw his realm as the meeting point of both worlds, and his monuments reflected that vision. The figures at Arsamea were not purely Greek nor purely Persian, they were both perfectly balanced, standing together in eternal unity. As the sun rises over the cliffs, the carvings come to life. Shadows slide across the reliefs, highlighting the strength of their forms. From a distance, they almost seem to move as if the gods and kings are still mid-conversation, frozen in time. Archaeologists have traced long inscriptions carved in Greek nearby, among the longest royal inscriptions ever found in Anatolia. They describe rituals, genealogies, and a king's plea for immortality. Antiochus ordered that his body be buried atop nearby Mount Nemrut, where a massive tumulus of crushed stone would conceal his tomb, guarded by colossal seated statues of himself and the gods. But here, at Arsamea, the story begins. This was the spiritual gateway, the place where mortal Antiochus became divine. One of the most striking things about these reliefs is their location. They're not placed for convenience, they're carved high into near inaccessible rock faces, hundreds of meters above the valley. Reaching them would have required scaffolds, pulleys, and sheer determination. Even today, standing before them requires a steep climb through broken stones and forgotten stairways. It's easy to imagine ancient priests ascending the same path, torches flickering in the wind, chanting prayers to the king god as the sun dipped below the horizon. What makes Arsamea even more mysterious is how little remains of its once grand structures. Time and earthquakes have erased most traces of the temples and palaces that once crowned the cliffs, yet the reliefs endure, carved too deep and too deliberately to fade completely. Each figure stares outward, as if watching the horizon for something eternal. One inscription at Arsamea tells of Antiochus's divine vision, a dream of uniting gods and men through stone, where faith could be seen, touched, and remembered. It describes the sacred rituals that once took place here, where fire altars burned day and night, and priests offered incense to the mountain spirits. The reliefs were likely part of that sacred theater, designed to be seen only by initiates who climbed the path to commune with the divine. The artistry itself holds clues. The robes are carved with both Persian and Greek motifs. The faces, though stylized, hold emotion, the faint curve of a smile, the calm confidence of immortality. Even the gestures are symbolic, the handshake, the mirrored stance, the gaze fixed not on each other, but outward, toward eternity. For centuries, the kingdom of Commagene faded into obscurity. Empires rose and fell, and the gods of Arsamea were forgotten, but their silent stone witnesses remained. When modern archaeologists returned, they found more than rock reliefs. They found a philosophy carved into the earth, a belief that humanity could reach the divine through art, order, and devotion. The figures of Arsamea are more than portraits of kings. They are reflections of an idea that power is sacred when guided by wisdom, and that to carve something eternal is to challenge death itself. Today, when travelers stand before these weathered giants, they often feel something strange, not fear, but familiarity. As if these faces, eroded by time, yet still watching, remember something we've all forgotten, that the urge to leave a mark, to speak beyond the grave, is the oldest instinct of all. In the stillness of Arsamea, with only the sound of the wind moving through the valleys, you can almost hear it, the echo of chisels striking stone, the murmur of priests reciting prayers, the heartbeat of an empire long turned to dust. The colossal figures stand not as ruins, but as messages, fragments of a lost dialogue between gods and men. They remind us that even when kingdoms crumble and languages vanish, the human desire to reach upward, to connect with something greater, never truly disappears. It lives on, carved into cliffs, carried by wind, waiting to be found again, and somewhere in the heart of Turkey's mountains, beneath the shifting light of dawn, the colossal figures of Arsamea still keep their vigil, guardians of a forgotten faith, forever reaching toward the heavens. The Longmen giant Buddhas. Along the banks of the Yi River, where mist rolls down from the hills like drifting memory, 1,000 stone faces watch in silence. They have stood there for over 1,500 years, gazing out from the cliffs of Longmen, their features worn yet unbroken, their presence eternal. This is the Longmen Grottos, one of the most extraordinary creations of the ancient world, a sacred mountain of stone, where faith and art became one. At first glance, the cliffs look ordinary, layers of gray limestone rising above the calm river. But as the sun moves and the light changes, shapes begin to emerge from shadow, eyes, hands, robes flowing like water, entire worlds carved into rock. Here, over 100,000 statues of the Buddha and his followers are etched into the face of the mountain, from figures smaller than a fingertip to giants towering more than 17 meters tall. Every curve of the chisel, every gentle smile tells a story, not only of religion, but of an empire's soul. The story of Longmen begins in the late 5th century, when China's Northern Wei dynasty sought to express its devotion to Buddhism in a form that could withstand time itself. The emperor ordered artisans and monks to carve the first caves into the cliffs near Luoyang, then the capital of China. What began as a small sanctuary grew into one of the greatest artistic and spiritual projects in human history, a work that continued for over 4 centuries, as dynasty after dynasty added new caves, new Buddhas, new prayers in stone. The air here feels different. Even today, when you walk through the narrow paths between the grottos, the silence is heavy, but not empty. It's filled with something ancient, something watching. The cliffside is alive with figures, serene Buddhas, stern guardians, celestial musicians, all frozen mid-motion. The Vairocana Buddha, seated in the main niche of the Fengxian temple, dominates the landscape. He is carved with perfect balance, broad shoulders, calm eyes, a faint smile that seems to understand every question you've never dared to ask. Scholars have long debated what that smile means. To some, it's compassion, the Buddha's endless patience for a troubled world. To others, it's a secret message, an artist's silent triumph over stone, time, and power. Because behind every statue at Longmen lies not just faith but politics. The Northern Wei rulers used Buddhism to unite their people, to show divine legitimacy. And as each dynasty rose and fell, from Tang to Song, each left its own vision carved into the cliffs. Together they form a living chronicle of belief, empire, and transformation. Imagine the scene 15 centuries ago, the sound of chisels striking rock, echoing through the valley, the flicker of oil lamps in half-finished caves, monks chanting sutras while artisans worked through the night. These were not ordinary craftsmen. Many were master sculptors, trained to capture the divine in human form. They used hammers, chisels, and copper tools, but also brushes and pigments. Because once the Longmen Buddhas were not gray stone, they were alive with color. Red, gold, and blue once covered their robes and halos, shimmering in torchlight. The river reflected their glow like fire. Over time, the pigments faded, and dynasties turned to dust. Yet the Buddhas endured. Their faces softened under rain, their edges blurred by centuries of wind, but their calm never changed. Even after centuries of neglect and looting, after wars and revolutions, the great Buddha of Longmen still gazes over the valley, as if nothing has passed. There's a legend that says when you stand before the main Buddha and close your eyes, you can feel the mountain breathing, the pulse of every prayer ever whispered here. Some monks believe the cliffs themselves are sentient, that each cave carved into the rock became a living being, housing not only images but consciousness. When modern archaeologists studied the pattern of caves and symbols, they noticed something strange. The arrangement of the grottos almost mimics a cosmic diagram, a mandala spread across the face of the earth. Coincidence, or deliberate design? The Fengshan Cave, completed during the Tang dynasty in the 7th century, is the masterpiece of the site. It was commissioned by Empress Wu Zetian, the only female emperor in Chinese history. Some scholars claim that the great Vairocana Buddha's face was modeled after her own, serene, intelligent, commanding. Whether true or not, the resemblance is haunting. Wu Zetian ruled with unmatched ambition, and Longmen was her statement to eternity, power through faith, immortality through art. Below the giant Buddha sit attendants, bodhisattvas with jewel-laden crowns, disciples with humble faces, guardians with fierce expressions. Together they form a perfect harmony, strength and peace, wisdom and protection. The scale is overwhelming, but it's the detail that steals your breath. The delicate folds of a robe, the soft curve of a lip, the ripple of an earlobe, each line cut by hand, each detail imbued with purpose. Somewhere in the middle grottos, there's a lesser-known carving called the 1,000 Buddha Cliff. a grid of countless miniature Buddhas, each one unique. They were carved by pilgrims, monks, and even ordinary travelers who wanted to leave something behind, a wish, a prayer, a name lost to time. When sunlight touches those tiny faces, it's like watching stars emerge from stone. What makes Longmen so human is not just its grandeur, but its persistence. Despite time, erosion, and destruction, the message remains: compassion, impermanence, balance. Even when the statues were damaged, even when faces were stolen or defaced, the spirit behind them never vanished. It's said that every missing piece only deepened the silence, making the remaining ones feel more alive. Today, scientists use 3D scanning to preserve Longmen's carvings, mapping every crevice, every crack. But even with all our technology, we can't fully explain how ancient artisans achieved such precision, symmetry, and beauty with simple tools. How did they carve thousands of statues into vertical rock, by hand, without modern scaffolds? How did they maintain such perfect proportions? Some theories suggest they used geometric systems derived from Indian and Central Asian art. Others believe secret measuring tools, guided by monks trained in mathematics and astrology. And then there are the acoustic properties. In certain caves, when you chant, the echo repeats itself in rhythmic waves, almost like a hidden resonance chamber. Ancient monks believed these echoes were voices of the enlightened, responding from beyond. Whether that's true or not, standing there, hearing your voice return like a whisper from the past, you can't help but feel you're part of something much older than yourself. Every culture leaves behind monuments, pyramids, cathedrals, temples. But Longmen feels different. It's not a building or a tomb. It's a vision carved directly into the living earth. It's the mountain itself that became sacred, the stone that became scripture. Each cave is a verse, each statue a prayer. Together they form an epic, one not written on paper, but on the bones of the world. The Longmen Buddhas remind us of a truth often forgotten, that even stone can feel alive when touched by faith. When you walk through those grottos and look into the eyes of the colossal Buddha, you see not just an ancient deity, but humanity itself, striving, searching, believing. The same desire that built these figures still burns in us today, the need to find meaning, to leave something behind, to speak to eternity. And as the sun sets over the Yi River, the cliffs glow with soft gold. Shadows climb the faces of the Buddhas, their smiles fading into dusk. The wind stirs, the water ripples, and for a moment, the whole valley feels like it's breathing, as if the mountain remembers. In that silence, you understand what the sculptors must have felt. Not worship, not duty, but wonder. A moment of connection between human hands and something vast, something infinite. The Longmen Buddhas are not relics, they're reminders that faith, art, and time all speak the same language, carved in silence and meant to last forever. The colossal statues of Palmyra. In the heart of the Syrian desert, where sand drifts like smoke and the wind hums ancient hymns, there once stood a city so magnificent that poets called it the bride of the desert. Its name was Palmyra, a mirage made real, rising from the dust like a dream of stone and light. Today, only fragments remain, broken columns, shattered walls, and scattered faces of gods once worshipped by kings. But beneath the ruins, buried deep in the desert's silence, lie giants. Colossal statues, lost for centuries, carved with impossible precision, watching from below as time erases everything above. The story of Palmyra begins more than 2,000 years ago, at the crossroads of the ancient world. Caravans from Persia, India, Rome, and Arabia passed through its gates, their camels heavy with silk, spices, and gold. Palmyra was more than a city, it was a bridge between worlds, a place where East met West, and where gods from every culture shared the same temples. As its wealth grew, so did its ambition. The people of Palmyra built monuments to match their pride, grand colonnades stretching for miles, temples crowned with golden roofs, and statues so large they seemed to challenge the sky. These were not mere decorations, they were declarations of power, belief, and eternity. The greatest of them stood in the Temple of Bel, a sanctuary dedicated to the god who ruled both heaven and earth. Within its sacred courtyard rose colossal figures of Bel himself, his attendants, and the guardians who protected his realm, carved from limestone and sandstone. These statues towered over worshippers, serene yet commanding, human yet divine. But the desert does not forgive arrogance. When Rome came, Palmyra became its jewel, and later, its rebel. Under Queen Zenobia, the city defied the empire, raising an army and claiming independence. For a brief moment, Palmyra ruled a kingdom stretching from Egypt to Anatolia. Then came retribution. In the year 2073 CE, Roman legions stormed the city, burned its temples, and left it to the sand. The great statues fell. Some shattered instantly. Others were buried whole beneath collapsing walls, sealed away in the tomb of time. For centuries, Palmyra disappeared. Travelers spoke of strange shapes in the dunes, heads half buried in sand, hands reaching out of the earth. but no one knew what they truly were. Only in the 20th century did archaeologists begin to uncover the truth. What they found astonished them. Beneath layers of sand lay the remains of giant figures, men and women carved in perfect symmetry, draped in flowing robes, their eyes inlaid with gemstone once used to imitate life. Some were as tall as 3 stories. They weren't gods in the Greek sense, nor kings like those of Egypt. They were something else, symbols of Palmyra's identity, its guardians, perhaps even its spirits. Each statue told a story. One depicts a woman named Bata, her head crowned with curls, her hand raised in eternal greeting. Another shows a merchant, his cloak filled with inscriptions in both Aramaic and Greek, proof of a city fluent in every tongue of its age. Others show warriors, nobles, and priests, faces frozen in quiet dignity, their gaze fixed somewhere beyond time. But the mystery lies in their scale. Why were some statues so immense, far larger than any human could have seen clearly in the dim light of a temple? Some researchers believe they were built for ritual, meant to impress not the eyes but the soul, to make believers feel small beneath the gaze of the divine. Others suggest something stranger, that these statues were aligned with the sun's path, designed to catch the first light of dawn or the last glow of dusk, turning their stone faces golden for just a few moments each day. When the light moved, so did their expression. Some looked sorrowful at sunrise, calm at noon, almost alive by twilight. There are whispers, even now among locals, that on nights when the desert wind falls still, you can hear faint echoes near the Temple of Bel. Not words, but tones. Low, resonant, like stone humming. Old legends say the statues still breathe beneath the ground, sighing as they remember the city that built them. In 2015, tragedy returned. Modern war tore through Palmyra. Explosions shattered temples, and many statues, the few that had survived Rome, sand, and time, were destroyed once more. But the story did not end there. Archaeologists had already documented the site with 3D scanning, creating digital ghosts of the lost sculptures. Using those scans, replicas were built in museums from London to Tokyo, resurrecting the giants once more, not in stone but in light. And yet nothing can match the originals, those still sleeping beneath the desert. When new excavations began near the Valley of the Tombs, researchers discovered fragments of colossal torsos buried deeper than expected, encased in sand so compact it had preserved even paint traces. Yes, paint. The giants of Palmyra were once radiant with color, gold leaf on the eyes, crimson robes, azure jewelry. They must have blazed under the sun like living gods. Inscriptions found near their bases mention something extraordinary, a word meaning to guard the gate of eternity. Could these statues have been more than idols? Were they part of a ritual architecture, positioned to mark cosmic alignments, perhaps protecting a sacred axis connecting the heavens and the underworld? The desert gives no answers, only silence. And yet the silence speaks. When you stand among the ruins, where broken faces lie scattered like fallen stars, you feel something vast pressing against you, not sadness, but presence. The city may have fallen, but its spirit never left. The very air feels charged, as if every grain of sand remembers. Modern teams continue to search beneath Palmyra's buried layers, guided by radar imaging and drone mapping. One scan revealed a hollow beneath the old temple foundations, a cavernous void nearly 20 meters deep. Some believe it's a collapsed storage chamber, others a hidden sanctuary. Within it, they expect to find the largest of all statues, a reclining figure rumored in old texts called the Watcher of Bel. If it still lies there untouched since the 3rd century, it would be one of the greatest archaeological finds in modern history. Palmyra was never meant to last. It was a city built on ambition, on trade, on the shifting sands of empire. And yet it endures, not in marble or gold, but in memory. Every time a fragment is unearthed, a hand, a face, a broken crown, it feels as if the city exhales again, returning slowly to life. The colossal statues of Palmyra are not just relics of a fallen civilization. They are reminders that even when worlds vanish, their echoes remain. They remind us that art can survive ruin, that silence can still tell stories, and that sometimes what's buried isn't gone, it's only waiting. As dusk falls over the desert, the ruins cast long shadows, and the stones begin to glow with the heat of the day. For a fleeting moment, the horizon shimmers, and you can almost see it, the old city rising again, colonnades lit by torchlight, the giants of Palmyra standing tall under the stars. Then the vision fades, only the wind remains, whispering across the sand, carrying with it the voice of a city that refused to die. The monumental statues of Hatra. Iraq buried. In the northern deserts of Iraq, between the Tigris and the fading horizon, lies a place once thought to be indestructible, a city born of both sunlight and shadow. Its name was Hatra, the fortress of the sun. Long before Baghdad rose from the plains, Hatra stood like a mirage of stone and strength, surrounded by massive circular walls and crowned with temples taller than any fortress of its time. For centuries, it resisted empires. Rome itself could not take it. But what truly set Hatra apart were not its walls, but its faces. Inside its temples stood monumental statues, figures so large and lifelike that even the emperors who visited them felt small. They gazed down from their pedestals with eyes carved so deep they seemed to follow the living. Today, most of them are gone, shattered, buried, or lost in conflict. But beneath the sands, archaeologists have found fragments, torsos, crowns, broken wings, pieces of something that once felt immortal. Hatra was founded sometime in the 3rd century BCE, during the rise of the Parthian Empire. It sat at the edge of great powers, where Greek, Persian, and Arab cultures intertwined. Every god had a place here. Temples were dedicated to Shamash, the sun god, to Nergal, the lord of the underworld, and to goddesses who wore both crowns and veils of mystery. The people of Hatra believed their city was protected, not by walls alone, but by the watchful gaze of their stone guardians. The statues of Hatra were unlike anything else in the ancient Near East. They weren't simple carvings of kings or gods, they were hybrids of both. Their faces human, but their posture divine. The sculptors of Hatra mastered something few had attempted before: expression. These weren't cold effigies, their lips curved in faint smiles, their brows furrowed with purpose, their eyes gazed as if aware of their surroundings. Imagine standing inside the temple of Shamash. The morning light spills through narrow slits in the wall, illuminating rows of towering figures, priests, kings, deities carved from limestone and alabaster, painted once in colors now long faded. Gold leaf once outlined their eyes. Real gemstones may have been set into their crowns. Each statue stood not merely as decoration, but as a presence, a reminder that the divine watched, always. But Hatra's splendor was not meant to last. The city survived 2 Roman invasions, repelling armies that outnumbered it 10-1. Legends say its gods turned arrows to dust in the air. But in the year 2040 CE, the tide changed. The Sasanian Empire, newly risen from Persia, marched westward, and this time, Hatra fell. The conquerors desecrated temples, toppled statues, and left the city to the winds. The desert reclaimed what was once holy. Sand filled the courtyards, covering the faces of gods until they vanished beneath the dunes. For centuries, Hatra was forgotten, its very name drifting into myth. When explorers rediscovered it in the early 20th century, they couldn't believe what they saw. Rows of headless torsos half buried in the sand, giant wings of angels carved in relief against fallen walls, colossal feet, toes the size of a man's hand, still anchored in their original pedestals. The more they dug, the stranger it became. Some statues showed features that didn't belong to the region: elongated faces, delicate curls, and robes reminiscent of both Greek and Mesopotamian art. It was as though sculptors from many civilizations had gathered here, creating something beyond culture, beyond empire. One statue stood out, a figure known as the Lord of the Gate, over 3 meters tall, his face serene, his right hand raised in a gesture of peace or power. On his chest, carved symbols that scholars have never fully deciphered, a mixture of Aramaic, Parthian, and something else entirely. When sunlight strikes the statue's chest at dawn, the carvings shimmer faintly, as if the stone still remembers fire. Archaeologists found another, a goddess, believed to represent Alat, protectress of the city. Her expression is calm, but her posture commanding, a warrior and mother combined. Around her feet are carved lions, her eternal companions. Even broken, her face radiates the quiet authority of a being that once inspired awe. As excavation continued, fragments of pigments were found, blue, red, gold, proving that these statues were once vividly painted. They were not ghosts of stone but radiant presences meant to dazzle the living, and yet the mystery deepens. Some statues were found buried deliberately, sealed within temple chambers, and hidden behind false walls. Why would the Hatranese hide their gods? One theory suggests that as the Sasanians approached, priests attempted to preserve the most sacred icons by concealing them underground. Another idea, whispered among archaeologists, is that certain statues were never meant to be seen by human eyes at all. They were ritual constructs, designed to be entombed as part of an ancient celestial offering. Inscriptions found nearby hint at strange rites: the binding of the gaze, the locking of light, the awakening beneath the sand. Could Hatra's priests have believed their statues held power even after burial? Then, in the 21st century, tragedy struck again. During modern conflicts, many of Hatra's temples were destroyed. Statues that had survived 2,000 years were smashed. The world watched as history was reduced to dust. But once more, like Palmyra, digital archaeology intervened. Teams had scanned every corner of the site in 3D before the destruction. Those scans are now being used to rebuild virtually, and in time, physically. But the land itself still hides secrets. In 2022, beneath a collapsed section of the Great Temple, ground-penetrating radar detected a hollow chamber. When excavations began, they uncovered the head of a colossal statue, unlike any previously recorded. A face with wide eyes, flanked by curling horns, and a faint smile frozen in the stone. Its style doesn't match any known deity. Some call it a demon, others a guardian. Locals simply call it the sleeper of the sand. It was carved from black basalt, polished to a mirror-like sheen, and positioned as if facing downward, watching the underworld. Was it part of a forgotten ritual, or a monument to a god no one remembers? Every discovery in Hatra seems to blur the line between religion, science, and myth. Some researchers suggest that the temples were built on precise geometric alignments, the statues placed along celestial axes corresponding to solstices and equinoxes. When the sun rose on certain days, its light would travel perfectly through the temple corridors, illuminating specific figures. It wasn't random art, it was an ancient dialogue between stone and sky. Standing in Hatra today among fallen columns and fractured faces, you can still feel that presence. When the desert wind moves through the ruins, it hums softly through the hollow eyes of statues. The sound is low, resonant, almost like a chant. It's easy to imagine that the gods of Hatra never truly left. Perhaps they sleep beneath the sand, waiting to be found again. Because every time a fragment emerges, a face, a crown, a carved hand clutching a forgotten symbol, the city breathes a little more life. Hatra's statues were never just stone. They were the embodiment of endurance, of beauty that survives conquest, fire, and silence. Even broken, they still stand, in memory, in myth, and in the stories we tell to keep them alive. As the sun sets over the desert, casting long shadows across the ruins, one can almost see them rising again, the colossal guardians of Hatra standing proud against the endless wind. Silent, eternal, watching. The colossal guardians of Enitai. In the wind-swept highlands of eastern Armenia, where the land ripples with ancient scars and the horizon carries whispers of forgotten empires, lies a city once called the City of 1001 Churches. Today, Anti is a haunting ruin, a ghost city carved from stone and silence, resting near the Turkish border along the Akurian River. Its broken cathedrals and collapsed palaces still bear traces of grandeur. Yet beneath the earth and scattered among the cliffs, archaeologists have begun uncovering something even more enigmatic. Colossal statues, remnants of a forgotten age of artistry and devotion, known now as the colossal guardians of Ani. These monumental figures, buried in the ruins of this medieval capital, are unlike anything else from the region's recorded history. Each statue stands several meters high, carved from volcanic tuff, the same stone that built Ani's cathedrals, yet their proportions, their stylized faces, and the sheer technical mastery behind them seem to belong to an era long before the city's official founding in the 5th century. Some of the figures bear traces of inscriptions in an unknown script. Others are adorned with crowns or armor motifs that blend Christian, Zoroastrian, and even Mesopotamian influences. The mystery deepens with every excavation. Were these guardians part of Ani's medieval splendor, or relics of a civilization far older, whose memory survived only through stone? When explorers first reached Ani, in the late 19th century, they described it as a frozen symphony of stone. Vast walls rose from the steppe, pierced by ornate gates, while the domes of churches lay shattered under centuries of earthquakes and invasions. Beneath one collapsed basilica, the first of these colossal figures was discovered. A fractured torso with arms crossed across its chest, its face weathered but still bearing an expression of solemn endurance. Over the following decades, more were found, buried beneath landslides and rubble, often near church foundations or ancient wells. Each seemed to guard an entrance, as if standing watch over something sacred hidden below. Archaeologists have debated their origins for over a century. Some suggest they were carved during the Bagratid dynasty, which ruled Ani during its golden age in the 10th and 11th centuries. During this time, Ani rivaled Constantinople and Baghdad, a thriving hub of trade, art, and faith. But the style of these statues does not fit neatly into medieval Armenian art. The proportions are massive, the faces abstract, the features monumental, in a way that recalls the stone colossi of earlier ages, Hittite, Urartian, even Assyrian. The level of erosion on the oldest statues also hints that they may have stood exposed for millennia before being buried. Recent excavations using ground-penetrating radar have revealed anomalies beneath Ani's citadel, deep cavities and voids suggesting subterranean halls or burial chambers. Within these depths, fragments of colossal limbs, carved in identical style, have been located but not yet fully excavated. Scholars speculate that Ani's medieval builders may have repurposed these ancient statues, integrating them into their churches as protective figures, unaware of their deeper history. If so, Ani may stand atop the bones of a civilization much older, perhaps one that inspired Armenia's later architectural genius. The mythology of the Armenian highlands lends further intrigue. In ancient epics, there are stories of giant stone guardians who watched over sacred valleys, beings created by the gods to protect temples from invaders. Some local elders still refer to the statues as Vishapakar, or dragonstones, a term used for megalithic monuments found across the region. These Vishapakars often depict dragons or serpents, symbols of water, fertility, and protection. Yet the Ani statues are humanoid, their features both divine and human, suggesting they may have represented deified kings or celestial guardians rather than beasts. In one excavation near the Church of the Redeemer, archaeologists uncovered a statue head over 2 meters tall, with almond-shaped eyes and a conical headdress. Embedded within its crown was a cavity containing traces of copper residue. Some researchers believe this might have held a bronze or gold ornament, perhaps used to catch sunlight, a symbol of divine illumination. Others propose it functioned as a kind of ritual marker, aligning with solar or stellar patterns, as many of Ani's churches were constructed along precise astronomical lines. A series of inscriptions found nearby add another layer of mystery. They reference the Watchers of Ararat and the Silent Ones of the Skygate. These phrases appear in no known Armenian manuscript but bear echoes of older Near Eastern myths, particularly Mesopotamian tales of the Apkallu, semi-divine beings said to have taught humanity the arts of civilization. Could these colossal guardians represent a local expression of that ancient archetype, protectors of knowledge, carved to embody wisdom and vigilance? When the Mongol invasion struck Ani in the 13th century, the city was looted and burned. Many of its statues were defaced or toppled, their fragments later buried by earthquakes and erosion. But what survived tells a story of endurance. Beneath centuries of dust and silence, these guardians remained, waiting for rediscovery, their purpose lost but their presence intact. In 2018, a joint Armenian-Italian archaeological mission unearthed another statue fragment, a right hand, nearly 1 meter in length, holding what appears to be a stylized orb or sphere. The precision of the carving, even in its damaged state, was astonishing. The hand's veins, fingernails, and musculature were rendered with near anatomical accuracy, as though frozen in motion. Theories abound. Some suggest these statues were part of a grand sculptural avenue, a ceremonial path leading to a lost temple or royal complex now buried beneath Ani's lower levels. Others propose they once stood atop the city's defensive walls, acting as stone sentinels, protectors in both a spiritual and physical sense. But the recurring motifs, the crossed arms, the orbs, the solemn faces, point toward ritual significance. They were not merely decorations, they were embodiments of faith, memory, and power. For locals, the rediscovery of these guardians rekindled old beliefs. Some claim the statues hum or vibrate at dawn, a phenomenon that archaeologists attribute to wind patterns moving through cracks in the rock. Others whisper that during storms, lightning seems drawn to their fragments, as if the ancient gods themselves still recognize their forms. The blend of science and myth here is seamless, each explaining and enriching the other. Modern technology has begun to shed light on the craftsmanship behind these giants. 3D scanning reveals chisel marks consistent with advanced stone tools, possibly bronze or even iron depending on their true age. Microscopic analysis of the surfaces suggests the use of abrasives and polishing techniques uncommon for the medieval era. The implications are striking. Whoever carved these statues possessed not only artistic genius, but technical mastery beyond what was thought possible for their time. One fragment in particular, a massive torso with traces of pigment, suggests that the statues were once painted. Traces of red ochre and black mineral pigment remain embedded in the porous tuff. This revelation changes everything. The guardians of Ani were not gray or lifeless. They were vibrant, alive with color, their eyes and symbols gleaming in the sunlight of a lost age. Standing among Ani's ruins today, the sense of timelessness is overwhelming. The city feels suspended between worlds, Christian and pagan, medieval and prehistoric, visible and buried. The wind sweeps through roofless churches and past the carved faces of guardians half buried in soil, as if the land itself is breathing memory. Every echo, every shadow seems to hint at a deeper story waiting to be unearthed. In the end, the colossal guardians of Ani are more than archaeological curiosities. They are the embodiment of a civilization's soul, its faith, fears, and aspirations immortalized in stone. Whether they were protectors of temples, memorials to lost kings, or remnants of a forgotten religion, their message endures, that humanity has always sought to carve permanence from impermanence, to defy time through creation. As new excavations continue, archaeologists believe they may soon find the foundation of the first temple that once stood at Ani's heart, a temple guarded by statues like these. Until then, the guardians remain silent, half buried in dust and mystery, watching over a city that once touched the heavens. And perhaps, when we look upon their worn faces, we glimpse something of ourselves, the eternal desire to be remembered, to leave behind something that speaks long after our voices fade. For Ani's colossal guardians still stand, broken, weathered, but unyielding, the last sentinels of a city that refuses to die. The guardian of the reef. Cayman Islands, underwater. Beneath the turquoise waters of the Caribbean, just off the coast of Grand Cayman, there stands a figure unlike any other. half human, half seahorse, a silent sentinel watching over the reef below. Locals call him the guardian of the reef. At first glance, he seems like something born from legend, a myth brought to life in bronze, but swim closer and you'll see the truth. This isn't merely a sculpture, it's a message, a creation meant to guard, to remind, and to endure. The Guardian was placed beneath the waves in 2014, just off the island's famous West Bay. Crafted by Caymanian artist Simon Morris, the statue stands more than 3 meters tall, rising from a coral pedestal like a knight of the sea. His body is human, muscular and determined, but where his legs should be, a spiraling seahorse tail curls downward, anchoring him to the ocean floor. In his hands he holds a long spear, pointed toward the horizon, not in aggression, but in vigilance. He watches, not over people, but over the reef itself. To the people of the Cayman Islands, this guardian symbolizes both the fragility and the strength of the sea. The Caribbean's coral ecosystems have suffered from rising temperatures, pollution, and careless tourism. And so this statue was not placed here as decoration. It was placed as a protector, to draw divers' eyes, to shift their attention from taking to caring. Yet as time passed, something unexpected happened. Nature accepted him. Coral began to grow along his arms. Tiny barnacles clung to his chest. Fish gathered in the shadow beneath his spear. The guardian became more than art. He became alive in a quiet, poetic way. His metal heart began to beat with the rhythm of the sea. The story of his creation is as fascinating as his presence. Simon Morris, a sculptor known for his marine-inspired works, wanted to create something that fused myth and ecology. He designed the Guardian as a hybrid being, half man, half creature, representing humankind's connection and duty to the ocean. Every curve of bronze, every ripple of his armor-like skin was designed to mirror the textures of coral, making him appear as if he had risen from the reef itself. When the statue was finally lowered into the sea, it took an entire team of divers and engineers to secure it to the ocean floor. It was a calm morning, sunlight dancing on the waves as the figure disappeared beneath the surface. And when it touched the sand, the water around it seemed to shimmer, as though the sea had just accepted its newest guardian. Over the years, the Guardian of the Reef has become more than a local landmark. It's become a sacred site of sorts. Divers describe an almost spiritual stillness when they hover before it. Schools of jacks drift by in silver spirals, rays glide past its base, and every few months, coral polyps extend across its bronze surface, slow, deliberate strokes of life reclaiming creation. Scientists now visit the site to monitor how the statue interacts with the environment. It's a living experiment, showing how metal, once lifeless, can become a foundation for marine renewal. Artificial reefs like this one give coral larvae a surface to attach to, allowing new ecosystems to form where old ones have vanished. The Guardian is not just guarding, he's helping rebuild what was lost. But even beyond its ecological purpose, there's something hauntingly timeless about this statue. Viewed from below, with rays of sunlight filtering through the waves, he looks almost ancient, as if he's been standing watch for centuries. Some divers say that when you approach him alone, you can feel the weight of his presence, that calm, patient vigilance of something greater than man, older than memory. There's a legend that's begun to form among locals, that the Guardian was inspired by an ancient Caymanian spirit said to dwell beneath the sea, protecting fishermen and guiding lost travelers back to shore. Some say he represents Poseidon. Others say he's a silent echo of humanity's forgotten reverence for the ocean. But everyone agrees, he feels alive. What's remarkable is how the sea itself has transformed him. The bronze that once gleamed gold now glows green with patina. Tiny anemones wave from his shoulders, soft corals bloom from the curve of his tail, and every year during certain tides, bioluminescent plankton drift across his form, making him shimmer in the dark, like a spirit made of light. It's as if the ocean is painting him, day by day, layer by layer, in its own language of life and decay. Divers who visit him often describe an emotion that's difficult to explain. Some feel peace, others, melancholy. But almost everyone surfaces with the same thought. He's watching the reef recover, watching us return, watching time itself flow by. In a world where we so often destroy what we love, the Guardian stands as a reminder that creation and protection can exist together, that beauty can emerge even from loss. He has no voice, no eyes that move, yet he speaks through silence, through the gentle sway of seagrass around his base, through the reflection of sunlight on the spear he holds, through the coral that slowly, patiently claims him as one of its own. In the years since his installation, storms have passed over Grand Cayman, hurricanes that ripped coral from their foundations, waves that reshaped the seabed. Yet every time divers returned, they found the Guardian still standing, unbroken. The sea may test him, but it never destroys him. Perhaps that's the truest symbol of all, resilience. Today, the Guardian of the Reef is not just a work of art or an artificial reef. He's become a myth made real, a fusion of human creativity and nature's quiet will. Tourists visit to see him, Photographers descend to capture him, and scientists study the life he nurtures. But for the locals, for the islanders who grew up with the sea as their constant companion, he's something else entirely. He's a promise that the ocean, though wounded, can still heal. At sunset, when the water glows gold and the horizon burns orange, the waves above him shimmer with light, and though no one can see it from shore, down there the guardian remains, motionless yet eternal, standing watch over the coral gardens that pulse with color and life. Perhaps, centuries from now, when the metal has corroded and the sea has taken him fully, only his shape will remain, fused with coral and shell, transformed into something natural, something eternal, a legend sleeping beneath the waves. Until then, the guardian of the reef endures, not as a statue, but as a symbol of protection, of beauty, and of the ancient bond between humanity and the sea. The guardian statues of Karakoram. Mongolia, ruins. In the vast, endless steppe of Mongolia, where winds whisper through grasslands older than memory, lies a place once called the heart of the world, Karakoram. The ancient capital of the Mongol Empire, the seat of Genghis Khan's power, where empires were planned, emissaries gathered, and the world seemed to unfold beneath one name. But buried beneath its ruins, scattered among crumbling walls and weather-worn stones, stand figures no chronicle fully explains, the guardian statues of Karakoram. Carved from granite and basalt, these sentinels do not depict warriors or kings. They are something older. Their faces are unreadable, their bodies worn by wind and frost, yet their presence is undeniable, like watchers frozen in stone, gazing toward horizons long forgotten. Archaeologists call them protective idols, locals call them stone men, or baubles, ancestral guardians placed to watch over the city's soul, but what they guard remains a mystery. When the ruins of Karakoram were rediscovered in the mid-20th century, explorers found dozens of broken statues half buried in the soil. Some stood upright, facing east. Others lay toppled, their eyes turned skyward, as if still searching for something in the distance. Each statue held a different object, a cup, a blade, a stone tablet, and none of their expressions were quite the same. They were not made for beauty, they were made for memory. To understand them, you must imagine Karakoram as it once was, not the silent plain it is today, but a living capital filled with sound and motion. Mongols, Persians, Chinese, and Europeans all walked its streets. It was a crossroads of belief and language, where Buddhist monks debated beside Muslim scholars, and traders from the Silk Road offered goods from oceans away. And at the city's edge, these statues stood, facing outward, like sentinels guarding the boundary between civilization and the wild. But time is merciless. By the 14th century, Karakoram had been abandoned. The empire that once ruled the world had splintered. The city was reduced to rubble by foreign armies and shifting sands. Only the statues remained, rooted in the soil, enduring centuries of wind, rain, and silence. The locals began to weave legends around them. Some said the statues were once living men, generals of the Khan, turned to stone for betraying their oath. Others claimed they were guardians placed there by shamans to protect the land from dark spirits that roamed the steppe at night. And even now, herders who pass through the ruins leave small offerings, a few drops of milk, a pinch of tobacco at the feet of these silent watchers. Because in Mongolia, stones are not just stones, they are memories, and sometimes they are alive. Modern archaeology has revealed more than myth. Ground scans and satellite imagery have shown that the statues align in patterns, forming invisible lines across the landscape. Many face the rising sun, others point towards sacred mountain peaks, or ancient burial sites hidden beneath the soil. It's as if each one marks a point in a greater design, a celestial grid stretching across the Mongolian plain. Some researchers now believe these guardians may not have belonged only to Karakoram itself, but to something larger, an entire network of stone markers tied to the nomadic empires that came before the Mongols. Traces of similar statues have been found thousands of kilometers apart, from Kazakhstan to Siberia, always watching, always facing east. Why east? Because in the ancient steppe cosmology, the east was the direction of rebirth, of light, of divine energy. To face east was to face eternity. When the morning sun rises over the Orkhon Valley, the statues seem to come alive. Shadows stretch behind them. The light touches their faces. And for a moment, it's easy to imagine that they still serve a purpose, that somewhere in their stillness, they remember what once was. The craftsmanship of the statues is puzzling. Though weathered, their features show an understanding of anatomy and proportion rare for that era. Some scholars suggest the artisans were influenced by Central Asian or Persian sculptural traditions brought through the Silk Road. Others argue they were purely Mongolian, carved by local stonecutters following ritual codes passed down by shamans. But what strikes everyone who sees them, archaeologists, travelers, or locals, is their emotionless calm. Unlike Greek or Egyptian statues, these figures do not express movement or feeling. They are stoic, eternal. as if carved to represent something beyond human emotion. Guardians, yes, but also reminders that all empires, no matter how mighty, return to dust. Beneath several statues, excavations revealed offering pits filled with ash, bone fragments, and melted metal. Some contained pieces of gold foil stamped with symbols, possibly offerings to ancestral spirits. Others contained iron blades deliberately bent in half, a ritual act meant to kill the weapon and dedicate it to the afterlife. And then, one of the statues changed everything. In 2019, a team from the Mongolian Academy of Sciences uncovered a guardian still standing upright, untouched for centuries. Beneath it lay a sealed stone box. Inside were fragments of parchment wrapped in silk, written in Old Uyghur script. The translation was incomplete, but a few words stood out: protect, gate, horizon, spirit of the empire. Was this an inscription dedicating the statue to the protection of Karakoram's spiritual boundaries? Or was it a warning, a message to future generations never to disturb what sleeps beneath the city's soil? No one knows, but the discovery reignited a mystery that refuses to fade. Today, if you travel to the Orkhon Valley, now a UNESCO World Heritage Site, you can still see the guardians. Some are cracked, some headless, others half buried in the earth. But they stand, always facing east, always watching. As the wind rushes across the plain, you can hear it whisper through the grass, a sound that almost resembles breath. And in that moment, it's hard not to feel that the guardians are still alive, holding vigil over a city long gone. Beneath them, fragments of the old capital still lie. Streets once filled with horsemen and merchants, temples dedicated to every faith, and the echoes of a world that believed it could last forever. Yet here, among the ruins, the stone faces endure, outlasting kingdoms, wars, and centuries of silence. They are not monuments to power, they are monuments to endurance, to the unseen bond between people and land, to the idea that memory can be carved in stone and still breathe beneath the open sky. The guardian statues of Karakoram remind us of a truth the Mongols understood well, that nothing is ever truly lost to time. It only waits, buried beneath the earth, until the wind decides to uncover it again. And when it does, the watchers will still be there, standing in silence, facing the dawn. The giants of the Konark Sun Temple. On the golden shores of Odisha, where the first light of dawn touches the Bay of Bengal, there stands a monument carved not just from stone, but from sunlight itself, the Konark Sun Temple. Dedicated to Surya, the sun god, it rises like a frozen chariot of flame, its wheels, horses, and pillars all sculpted with precision that still defies imagination. But among the thousands of carvings that adorn its walls, there are figures that don't quite fit. Giant human forms, towering over others, carved with an intensity that feels almost alive. They are not gods, they are not kings, they are something in between. For centuries, pilgrims and scholars have walked these ruins, whispering questions into the wind. Who were these giants? Why were they carved into the temple's body, towering, muscular, yet strangely human? To answer that, we must go back to the 13th century, when King Narasimhadeva I of the Eastern Ganga dynasty ordered this temple built. It was meant to be more than a shrine. It was a symbol of cosmic order, a representation of time, the heavens, and the divine chariot of Surya himself. The temple's design was pure celestial geometry. 12 massive wheels, each symbolizing a month, carved with minute detail to track the movement of the sun. 7 stone horses pulling the chariot, the days of the week. Every inch told the story of life's cycle, of dawn and dusk, of creation and decay. But at the temple's base, amid the dancers, lions, and celestial beings, there stand colossal figures unlike anything else in Indian art. Each giant is carved mid-motion, their muscles tensed, their expressions caught between devotion and pain. Some seem to strain under invisible weight, others appear to guard unseen thresholds. When the British archaeologists first documented the site in the 19th century, they noted these unusually proportioned men, but could not explain their purpose. Some believed they represented Atlantis, architectural supports shaped like men, symbolic of strength holding the world. Others thought they were titanic warriors, guardians placed to protect the sacred temple from evil. But local legends tell a very different story. They speak of giants who walked with the sun, beings of immense strength who helped the gods raise the temple itself. It's said that the Sun Temple could not be built by mortal hands alone. The stones were too heavy, the carvings too intricate, the alignments too precise, so the gods sent their helpers, divine giants, to shape the stone by moonlight and vanish before dawn. When the final spire was placed, legend says, the giants stepped into the walls themselves, offering their eternal service to Surya, becoming part of the structure they had built. And so they remain, frozen in stone, watching over the temple for eternity. Archaeologically, the theory is less divine but equally fascinating. The giants may represent cosmic forces, the energies that sustain the universe. In Vedic cosmology, the sun's chariot is powered by immense elemental beings, known as Maruts or Ashvins, divine twins linked to vitality and storm. The sculptors of Konark, blending art and theology, may have chosen to depict these forces as physical giants, their massive forms symbolizing the power of the cosmos itself. Yet even that explanation leaves something unresolved. Why do the giants appear strained? Their poses are not of calm divinity, but of effort, as though they are struggling to hold something invisible, to bear a cosmic burden. Some researchers now believe the giants may be literal structural symbols representing the temple's physical and spiritual weight. They hold up the chariot of the sun, both artistically and metaphorically, showing that the divine order rests upon human effort, endurance, and sacrifice. In 2018, archaeologists used 3D scanning to map the remaining statues in detail. The precision was astonishing. The veins, the folds of muscle, even the subtle curvature of the joints were all carved with anatomical perfection. For a temple built in the 1200s, this kind of realism is rare, even for Indian art. It suggests that the sculptors had not only skill but a deep understanding of how the human body could embody divine energy. But there's more. Hidden in the cracks of the walls, inscriptions in ancient Odia script speak of servants of the sun and the keepers of the dawn. Could these refer to the very giants carved into stone? Were they symbolic priests, or representations of a lost mythic order, an ancient brotherhood sworn to maintain the balance between day and night? Local guides will tell you stories that sound half myth, half memory. They say that sometimes, in the quiet hours before sunrise, when the tide rolls in and the first light strikes the stone, you can see the giants shimmer, their eyes catching the light as if awakening, for just a moment from centuries of stillness. Today only a fraction of the temple remains. The main tower collapsed long ago, its massive shikara lost to time. But what stands is enough to remind us that this was once one of the most advanced architectural masterpieces on Earth. Every carving served purpose. Every shadow, every alignment, told time. And the giants, standing silent, unbroken, still carry that weight. Some historians now see them as more than decoration. They believe the sculptors encoded cosmic data within their proportions. The ratio of each giant's body matches mathematical constants found in the temple's geometry. Pi, the golden ratio, and solar distances. It's as if the builders used the human form as a bridge between the earthly and the celestial. What's remarkable is how alive the giants still feel. Weathered by 7 centuries of wind and salt, their faces remain expressive, some gentle, some fierce. You can almost feel motion in the stillness, like the heartbeat of the temple itself hasn't quite stopped. And perhaps that's the secret of Konark. It isn't a ruin of stone, it's a frozen sunrise, a moment when human devotion and divine energy met, and time itself stood still. The giants, whether mythical builders or symbolic guardians, remind us that ancient India saw no division between art, science, and spirituality. To carve was to calculate, to build was to worship, and to endure. That was the truest offering to the gods. Even now, as the waves crash near the temple's base, and tourists wander between broken walls, you can feel something immense, as if those giants still hold up, not just the temple, but the very idea of faith itself. Because faith, like stone, can erode, but when carved deep enough, it never disappears. The Konark Sun Temple stands as proof that when humans reach for the divine often answers, not in miracles, but in craftsmanship, in lines of stone that outlast centuries, in faces of giants who still watch the rising sun, waiting for the day their god returns. The forgotten pharaohs of Tanis. Egypt's ruins. In the silent sands of Egypt's Nile Delta, there lies a city that was once a royal capital, but now sleeps beneath layers of time and dust. Its name is Tanis, the city of forgotten pharaohs. Once adorned with temples, obelisks, and colossal statues that rivaled Thebes and Memphis, Tanis was a city built for eternity. Yet, today, only fragments remain. Broken stone heads, toppled kings, and shattered hieroglyphs scattered across the desert. But beneath that silence, archaeologists have found something that redefines how we see Egypt's ancient past. The buried giants of Tanis. Tanis was founded more than 3,000 years ago, in Egypt's 21st dynasty. It rose at a time when Thebes ruled the south, and political power began shifting north. Pharaohs who once ruled from Pi-Ramesses, the great capital of Ramses II, abandoned their flooded city and moved here to Tanis, bringing with them their monuments, their temples, and even the statues of their gods. But they didn't just move them, they recarved them. The colossal statues that stand in Tanis today bear the names of new kings inscribed over older ones, a practice known as usurpation. To the eyes of history, these pharaohs rewrote their legacy in stone. What we see today are the remnants of that royal illusion. Massive statues of granite and quartzite, each representing power, divinity, and the continuity of kingship. Among them, the twin statues of Ramses II stand as towering witnesses. Each was once over 8 meters tall, carved from solid red granite quarried in Aswan, then transported hundreds of kilometers down the Nile. Their faces, calm, serene, yet commanding, stare eternally toward the horizon, symbols of a civilization that believed in immortality through craftsmanship. Yet the story of Taunus is not one of triumph, but of rediscovery. For centuries the city was lost to the world, buried by shifting sands and Nile floods. It disappeared from maps and memory. Ancient Greek historians spoke of Zoan, a city of kings. The Bible mentioned it as the place where Moses confronted Pharaoh. But its true location remained a mystery until the 19th century, when archaeologists began unearthing colossal fragments in the delta mud. What they found stunned them: rows of buried statues, toppled temples, and tombs untouched since the days of the pharaohs. In 1939, French archaeologist Pierre Montet made one of Egypt's greatest finds here, the royal necropolis of Taunus. Inside, he discovered the tombs of forgotten kings, Susenens I, Amenemopi, and Shoshenqewith II. Their treasures rivaled those of Tutankhamun, yet the world barely noticed. The discovery came as war broke out in Europe, and history's gaze turned away. The buried gold of Taunus, the silver coffins, the intricate jewelry, all were overshadowed by the chaos of the modern world. But among the artifacts, one thing stood apart: the colossal statues that guarded these tombs. Their faces eroded yet still noble, their inscriptions telling tales of kings erased and reborn. The statues of Taunus reveal the strange duality of Egyptian art. They are both beautiful and eerie, each one an echo of an older monument, reclaimed and renamed. Some bear the features of Ramses II, but carry the titles of Susenus. Others mix the iconography of multiple dynasties, as if the kings of Taunus sought to weave themselves into Egypt's ancient lineage. It was not mere vanity, it was a declaration that even in decline, Egypt's royal bloodline remained divine. As archaeologists mapped the city, they realized Taunus was built directly upon the ruins of earlier capitals. Its temples reused blocks from Pi-Ramesses, its statues from Bubastis and Heliopolis. Every piece of Taunus was recycled history, a city built from the bones of Egypt's past. This patchwork construction created a paradox. To the untrained eye, Taunus looked ancient even when it was new. To the priests and artisans who carved these stones, it was a deliberate act, a resurrection of Egypt's golden age. But there is something else buried in Taunus that intrigues modern researchers. Beneath layers of sand and collapsed granite, geophysical scans have revealed cavities, vast underground chambers that could hold more statues, perhaps even unopened royal tombs. The site remains largely unexcavated. Each year, shifting water levels and salt erosion threaten to destroy what remains, yet the sands keep their grip tight. Some archaeologists believe entire temple complexes still lie hidden, preserved in the anaerobic clay of the delta. The colossal statues of Taunus are not just ruins, they are silent witnesses. Their eyes, carved from stone, seem to follow you as you walk through the broken courtyards. Their bodies, once shining with polished surfaces, now bear the scars of centuries. But even in their decay, there is majesty. Standing before them, one feels the weight of lost time, of kings who ruled without memory, of artisans whose names were never recorded, of gods whose temples now crumble into the earth. Recent discoveries have added new layers to the story. Digital imaging and laser scanning have shown that some of these statues once bore gilded surfaces and painted details. They were not the lifeless gray forms we see today. They shone under the Egyptian sun, glinting with gold, blue, and red pigments. Imagine walking into Tanis at its height. Colossal pharaohs gleaming like living gods, their temples lined with polished granite, the air filled with incense and prayer. Now, only silence remains. Local legend says the statues of Tanis were cursed, that any who disturbed them would be struck by illness or misfortune. Early explorers in the 1800s wrote of workers refusing to touch certain stones, claiming they heard whispers at night near the ruins. Whether superstition or coincidence, it adds an eerie presence to the site, as if the kings still guard their secrets. But beyond the myths, the story of Tanis is about the resilience of memory. For centuries, Egypt's sands have buried and revealed its past in cycles, as if the land itself chooses when to speak. The pharaohs of Tanis may not be as famous as Tutankhamun or Ramses, but their monuments tell a quieter, more haunting story of rulers who tried to hold on to glory, even as their world faded. They built giants from the rubble of older giants, hoping the past would shield them from oblivion. Today, archaeologists continue their work here, often in near silence, brushing away grains of sand that haven't moved in millennia. Each fragment, each chipped inscription brings the story closer to life, and as more statues emerge from the dust, colossal faces staring blankly at the modern sky, we are reminded that even forgotten kings can rise again. The buried giants of Tanis are not just relics of Egypt's past. They are mirrors of our own obsession with permanence, our desire to be remembered, to leave behind something that will outlast us. Yet even the mightiest stones fall, the sands reclaim everything, eventually. Still, there is a strange comfort in Tanis. Amid the broken temples and toppled statues, one can feel that the city has not truly died. It only sleeps. The giants beneath its soil are patient. They have seen empires rise and fall, floods wash away kingdoms, and yet they endure, half-buried but unbroken. And as the wind moves softly over the delta, the faces of the forgotten pharaohs seem almost alive again, waiting for the day their city will once more emerge from the sands, and their names, whispered for the last time thousands of years ago, will finally be spoken again. The giants of Mahabalipuram. India. Temple. There is a stretch of India's southeastern coast where the land meets the sea, with an almost sacred stillness, where salt winds whisper through ancient rock, and waves break against carved stone giants that have stood for more than 1,000 years. This is Mahabalipuram, or Mamallapuram, a city etched into granite by the hands of kings and artisans who sought to turn myth into permanence. Here, among the roar of the Bay of Bengal, lies one of the most mysterious sights in South India, a place where temples seem to rise directly from the rock, and colossal carvings tell stories of gods, demons, and forgotten civilizations. For centuries, locals have called it the City of the Seven Pagodas. Legends claim that once, 7 magnificent temples lined this coast, glowing like jewels under the southern sun. Today only one stands above the waves, the famous Shore Temple, while the rest, they say, were swallowed by the sea. But what makes Mahabalipuram truly extraordinary isn't only its legend, it's the scale, precision, and imagination behind its carvings. Here, entire cliffs have been turned into storyboards of Hindu mythology. At the heart of it all stands the descent of the Ganges, or Arjuna's penance, a rock relief so vast that it seems alive. It stretches almost 100 feet across and 40 feet high, filled with hundreds of figures, gods descending from the heavens, animals gathering near a sacred river, and a lone sage standing in prayer beneath the open sky. Each detail, chiseled into granite 13 centuries ago, still speaks. The elephants, carved with remarkable realism, stand as towering testaments to Pallava craftsmanship. One elephant, life-sized and perfectly proportioned, is so natural that even modern sculptors study it to understand ancient techniques. The Pallava kings, especially Narasimhavarman I, known as Mamalla, the great wrestler, ruled here in the 7th century. Under his reign, Mahabalipuram became a city of stone. But unlike other kingdoms that built upward, the Pallavas built inward, carving their temples directly from living rock. This was architecture as meditation, cutting away the unnecessary to reveal the divine within. Each monument here tells a story of devotion and engineering mastery. The 5 rathas, or pancha-rathas, look like chariots lined up for a cosmic journey. Yet none of them were assembled. Each was carved from a single piece of granite, shaped by hand, detail by detail, from roof to base. These weren't mere temples, they were experiments, models for designs that would later define South Indian temple architecture. The Bhima Ratha towers like a stone mountain, its curved roof echoing wooden prototypes long lost to time. The Draupadi Ratha, delicate and compact, resembles a shrine to feminine divinity. And then there's the Dharmaraja Ratha, rising with multi-tiered sanctuaries stacked like steps to the heavens, a form that would evolve into the towering gopurams of later centuries. But beyond their artistry, these monuments hide mysteries that defy time and reason. How did ancient craftsmen carve such massive structures with such symmetry, using only primitive tools? How did they manage to align them with celestial markers, as if following a cosmic blueprint? And why do some reliefs seem unfinished, frozen in mid-creation, as if the sculptors vanished overnight? Archaeologists believe the Pallava artisans used iron chisels and hammers, guided by grids drawn with natural dyes. But others suggest something deeper, that these were sacred geometries, mathematical codes hidden within mythic imagery. The layout of Mahabalipuram's monuments follows a distinct pattern, mirroring constellations visible in the night sky. Some even align with solstice sunrise points, suggesting astronomical awareness far ahead of its time. Yet, as precise as these carvings are, the sea has always been the city's most unpredictable sculptor. Ancient Tamil texts speak of a cataclysmic flood that swallowed the coast, a flood that, many believe, consumed the lost temples of Mahabalipuram. For centuries, sailors from Greece, Rome, and China wrote of a city that shimmered on the horizon, filled with golden spires and giant idols. Then one day, it was gone. In 2004, when the Indian Ocean tsunami struck, something remarkable happened. As the waves retreated, the ocean briefly unveiled what had been hidden for centuries: stone walls, sculptures, and temple fragments beneath the seabed, just off Mahabalipuram's coast. Divers later confirmed the remains of submerged structures, carved blocks, pillar bases, and walls extending hundreds of meters underwater. For a few hours, legend became fact. The city of the 7 pagodas was real. But what exactly sank those temples remains unclear. Some researchers point to tectonic shifts and centuries of coastal erosion. Others suggest that the Pallava builders constructed too close to the sea, unaware that their own craftsmanship would one day be claimed by the same waters that inspired it. Whatever the cause, the ocean turned Mahabalipuram into a riddle, half on land, half beneath the waves. Standing on the shore today, it's easy to feel the pull of that mystery. The shore temple, battered by salt and wind, still faces the horizon, its twin towers shimmering at sunrise. Inside, granite shrines to Shiva and Vishnu endure, their surfaces worn smooth by time. Outside, stone lions guard the perimeters, their eyes forever fixed on the sea, as if waiting for something to return. And yet, not all of Mahabalipuram's giants are religious icons. Some of the carvings, colossal animals, serpents, and celestial beings, seem almost playful, perhaps meant to teach or inspire apprentices. One of the strangest is a massive spherical boulder perched on a slope, called Krishna's butterball. Despite weighing over 250 tons, it has balanced perfectly for centuries, defying gravity, storms, and earthquakes. No one knows how it got there, whether nature placed it, or if it was deliberately positioned by ancient engineers. British colonial officials once tried to move it with elephants, but failed. Locals simply smiled and said, "It stands where Krishna left it." Mahabalipuram's story doesn't end in the 7th century. Over the years, the sea continued to rise and fall, reshaping the coastline. Wind carried sand over carvings, burying some completely. For generations, fishermen told tales of lights beneath the waves, and stone faces visible at low tide. Only recently have satellite and sonar scans revealed what they might have seen: submerged terraces and possible temple bases, extending into the bay. If true, Mahabalipuram is not just an archaeological site, it's a partially drowned city, a link between land and sea, history and legend. Yet what truly sets it apart is how alive it still feels. Walk among its monuments at dawn, and you can hear the same wind that once carried the chants of Pallava priests. The granite still glows gold under the rising sun, and for a moment, the carvings seem to move. Elephants walking, sages praying, gods descending from heaven. This is what makes Mahabalipuram eternal. It is not frozen history, it breathes with the rhythm of myth. It reminds us that civilizations don't vanish, they transform, shifting from stone to story, from ruins to legend. The giants of Mahabalipuram still stand, carved not to be worshipped, but to be remembered. They are proof that art can outlast empire, that stone can carry faith across 1,000 years, and when the tide recedes and the sun dips into the sea, the silhouettes of those temples seem to reach once more toward the horizon, like old gods remembering their own reflection beneath the waves. The monumental statues of Byblos. Lebanon ruins. Ruins. There is a wind that never stops moving along the coast of Lebanon, a warm, ancient wind that carries the scent of the sea and the memory of gods. It whispers through the ruins of Byblos, one of the oldest continuously inhabited cities on earth. To the world, it is known as Gabal, the city of stone and script, but to those who've walked among its broken columns and buried temples, it is something far older, a place where myth and civilization first shook hands. Byblos was already ancient when Egypt was young. Here, more than 7,000 years ago, stonemasons carved their first blocks. Sailors built the earliest ships that would carry cedar wood and faith across the Mediterranean. And among these layers of time, archaeologists began finding fragments of something immense, fragments of giants, massive torsos of men and gods, heads carved from limestone and basalt, their features worn smooth by centuries of wind and sand, arms so large that a single hand could span the width of a man's chest. These were not idols for worship in the way we understand. They were symbols of power, guardians of a sacred port that connected heaven, earth, and the sea. The monumental statues of Byblos were first unearthed in the early 20th century. French and Lebanese archaeologists working near the ancient temples of Balat Gabal, the great goddess of the city, began uncovering colossal figures unlike anything seen elsewhere in the Levant. They were heavier, rougher, but alive with emotion. Some carried offerings, others held weapons. Their eyes, large, oval, deliberate, seemed to watch every movement in the dig. The deeper the team dug, the older the city seemed to become. Layer after layer revealed different civilizations: Canaanite, Phoenician, Egyptian, Hellenistic, Roman. Each had added its mark, its idols, its gods, but the earliest statues, the largest, belonged to a time before writing. Their creators left no names, no records, only these silent watchers, standing amid broken walls and courtyards. Many of the statues were found buried deliberately, face down, as if hidden during some ancient catastrophe. Some had been toppled and smashed, their fragments scattered between temple foundations. Others appeared to have been sealed inside chambers with offerings of shells, bronze daggers, and animal bones, perhaps to appease the gods they represented. One statue stood out among all others. It was found near the Temple of the Obelisks, a strange forest of stone pillars that rise like fingers reaching toward the sky. Here, beneath a layer of limestone blocks, archaeologists uncovered the torso of a massive figure, its shoulders broad, its stance commanding, its face calm, yet distant. When reconstructed, it stood over 3 meters tall. Traces of paint and gilding still clung to its surface, hinting that once it might have shimmered in red, gold and black beneath the Levantine sun. Inscriptions nearby spoke of El, the father of gods in Canaanite belief, and Baalat Gabal, the lady of Byblos, protector of sailors and keeper of the city's fate. Scholars believe these colossal statues represented divine intermediaries, not just gods but celestial guardians anchoring the temple to the cosmos. Byblos wasn't merely a city of trade, it was a crossroads of religion and science. The Phoenicians who lived here would later invent the first true alphabet, a system of 22 letters that would travel across empires and evolve into Greek, Latin, and Arabic scripts. It's poetic that in the city where writing was born, the earliest form of communication was still stone, giants that spoke without words. As centuries passed, Byblos became a living archive of civilizations. When the Egyptians traded here during the Old Kingdom, they called it Kbn, the city of cedar and magic. Pharaohs sent ships to Byblos for its sacred wood, used in temples, sarcophagi, and boats for the afterlife. In return, the Egyptians left behind amulets, statues of Isis and Osiris, and carvings bearing hieroglyphs praising the goddess of the city. One statue fragment even bears an Egyptian-style headdress, suggesting not conquest, but connection, a blending of cultures under shared sky and sea. The monumental statues of Byblos are more than art, they are a timeline in stone. From one angle you see the stylized geometry of the early Bronze Age, from another the flowing realism of Hellenistic hands. Every chisel mark tells of a craftsman standing on sacred ground, shaping gods out of geology. But there is another layer of mystery, a question that lingers in the minds of every researcher who's walked these ruins. Why were so many of these statues buried intentionally? What were the people of Byblos trying to protect, or hide? Some historians believe that invasions, perhaps by the Sea Peoples or later empires, forced the priests to conceal their sacred icons. Others suspect something more ritualistic, that the burying of statues marked the end of a cosmic cycle, a renewal ceremony where old gods were returned to the earth before new ones rose in their place. It's a theory strengthened by the fact that many of the buried figures face west, toward the setting sun, the symbolic realm of death and rebirth. And then there's the sea. Byblos has always faced the sea, and feared it. Legends tell of storms that swallowed ships whole, of waves that carried away temples. Some divers off the coast of modern Jabil have found submerged blocks and carvings beneath the waves, possible remains of coastal shrines long lost to erosion. Could more statues still lie beneath the harbor floor, preserved in silt for millennia? Modern excavation has only scratched the surface. Ground-penetrating radar surveys reveal anomalies beneath certain areas of the ancient port, large, dense masses shaped too precisely to be natural rock. Archaeologists hope that one day, new technology will allow them to uncover these hidden relics without destroying what lies above. Because every layer of Byblos is precious, each brick, each statue, a page in humanity's oldest book. Walk through the ruins today, and you'll feel that history breathing. Crumbling walls of Crusader castles stand beside the remnants of Phoenician temples. Cedar trees sway over columns once dedicated to the goddess of the sea. And in the city's small museum, those colossal statues wait. Quiet, watchful, eternal. Their faces, though eroded, still carry a strange calm, as if they remember everything that has ever happened here. When light falls across them at dusk, the stone seems to come alive again. Shadows carve out their ancient eyes, and for a brief moment, it feels as though the gods of Byblos are awake, still guarding the oldest harbor in the world. Because Byblos is not a ruin, it is a heartbeat, one that has never stopped, even as empires rose and fell, and those monumental statues are its pulse made visible, silent witnesses to the story of civilization itself. The Talamoni Guardians. Italy. Underwater. Beneath the waves of Tuscany's coast, where sunlight fades into a realm of shifting blues, lie the silent watchers of Talamoni, the guardians beneath the sea. They are not myths, they are there, resting in the deep, carved faces and stretched hands, standing where no human has walked for centuries. Talamoni is a small harbor town today, quiet and beautiful. But long before yachts and fishermen, it was a fortress city, an Etruscan stronghold built more than 2,500 years ago. And according to local legends, it guarded something extraordinary, a temple that once faced the Tyrrhenian Sea, its entrance flanked by colossal statues carved from white limestone. They called them the Guardians of the Horizon, protectors of sailors, warriors of stone who looked eternally toward the setting sun. For generations, the story of these statues was dismissed as folklore, until 1960, when divers searching for ancient amphorae off the Talamoni coast found something they couldn't explain. At a depth of nearly 15 meters, half buried in silt, they saw the unmistakable outline of a human face, eroded but unmistakably carved. Then another, then an arm, a torso, Fragments of what seemed to be a line of statues collapsed together beneath centuries of sea movement. The discovery shocked archaeologists. What were statues? Each nearly 3 meters tall, doing underwater, far from any known temple or ruin. Were they toppled by an earthquake, pulled into the sea as the coastline eroded, or were they deliberately sunk, perhaps as offerings to gods who ruled both sea and storm? The Etruscans, who once ruled this region, worshipped powerful deities tied to nature, the sea, thunder, and the underworld. To them, water wasn't destruction, it was transformation. When they buried their dead, they often sent symbolic gifts into the depths, weapons, coins, statues, believing the waves were a passage between worlds. Could the Talamoni guardians have been part of such a ritual, or were they victims of the sea itself? When the first fragments were brought to the surface, scientists found they were carved from the same limestone used in Etruscan tombs near Orbitello, nearly 40 kilometers away. That meant these statues were not local improvisations. They had been transported, with purpose, from inland quarries to the coast, a monumental task for a civilization that predated Roman engineering. Each statue seemed different. One bore the faint outline of a helmet, another, the remains of a spear. But what truly drew attention were their eyes, wide, round, and drilled deep as if to hold gemstones or metal inlays long since lost. Even eroded, their gaze felt alive. Marine archaeologists began to map the site. What they found was not random debris, but a pattern. The statues formed a semicircle around what appeared to be the foundations of a stone platform, perhaps a sanctuary, or the remains of a temple now claimed by the sea. Traces of pottery, anchors, and bronze fittings surrounded it, and deep core samples revealed layers of burnt clay and charcoal, evidence of an ancient fire. It seemed that at some point in the late 4th century BCE, Talamoni's shoreline had been struck by a violent event, a quake, a tsunami, or both. The coastline shifted, the temple fell, and the statues were swallowed by the sea. But strangely, many of them had been found upright, still standing on their bases. How could that be? That question led to a remarkable theory. Researchers proposed that the temple had been built partly over the water, with its foundation anchored on rock shelves extending beneath the waves, a design meant to impress both gods and men. If true, that would make it one of the earliest examples of coastal engineering in the ancient Mediterranean. Over the decades, more fragments were found, a carved foot here, a torso there. Each piece added to the picture. Tall, muscular figures wearing armor, their hands raised as if in oath or warning. In local mythology, these guardians were believed to protect the coast from invading fleets. According to one Etruscan legend, when foreign ships approached, the sea itself would rise to defend the temple, swallowing both enemy and guardian together. In the 1980s, underwater imaging confirmed something even stranger, a second set of ruins. Farther out, almost identical in layout, but completely buried beneath sand. Could it be that the Talamoni guardians once stood not in one temple, but two? A twin shrine, mirroring earth and sea, one above the waves, one below. Divers describe the site as hauntingly beautiful. Even in the dim light, you can see the contours of faces, the curve of arms reaching outward, the shimmer of fish weaving through stone ribs. Nature has claimed the guardians, covering them in coral and sea moss. Yet, even eroded, they seem alive, as though waiting for the tide to turn, for their city to rise again. Local fishermen still tell stories of lights under the water on calm nights, faint glows near the site, flickering like candles. Scientists dismiss it as bioluminescent plankton, but the old men shake their heads. They say it's the guardians, their eyes reopening when the sea is quiet. Today, the ruins of the Talamoni guardians are a protected underwater archaeological zone. Few are allowed to dive there without permission, and photography is restricted to preserve the fragile site. But even the limited images released show something mesmerizing, a meeting between human art and ocean eternity. To swim among those statues is to stand in the same silence their sculptors knew. The moment between creation and worship, between the living world and the unseen. Each wave that passes overhead distorts the sunlight, making the figures seem to move, as if the sea itself remembers the shape of their devotion. In the end, perhaps that is the legacy of the Talamoni guardians. They were never meant to be seen by man forever. They were carved for the gods and the sea. Eternal and patient, has simply reclaimed what was always its own. And yet, their story didn't vanish. It waits, beneath the surface, in every ripple, in every whisper of the tide, calling us to look deeper. Because sometimes the most powerful monuments aren't the ones that stand tall on land, but the ones that keep their secrets beneath the sea. The silent titan of Shravanabelagola, India. The Gomachwara statue. Across the rolling granite hills of southern India, where the air hums with the low chant of temple bells and the morning mist drifts between ancient peaks, there stands a figure carved from eternity itself. He has no crown, no weapon, no armor. Yet for over 1,000 years, he has watched empires crumble and generations fade, unmoved and untouched. His name is Bahubali, but to the world, he is known as Gomachwara, the silent titan of Shravanabelagola. The climb to meet him begins before dawn. Pilgrims ascend the steep 600 steps carved into the rock, their bare feet pressing against stone polished smooth by centuries of devotion. At the summit, as the first light of day brushes across the hill, he emerges from shadow, 57 feet tall, sculpted from a single block of granite, serene and impossibly human. His face is calm, eyes half closed in meditation, lips curved into an eternal stillness. Vines curl gently around his legs, not as chains, but as symbols of the world he left behind. The air around him feels different, heavier somehow. Not with weight, but with presence. It is said that in the 10th century, when the Western Ganga dynasty ruled these lands, a minister named Chavundaraya commissioned this statue as an act of spiritual devotion. He sought to immortalize the moment when Bahubali, after conquering his brother in battle, looked upon the battlefield and felt only emptiness. In that moment, he renounced everything, his kingdom, his pride, his very identity, and stood in meditation until nature itself began to grow around him. And so, what we see in stone is not victory, but transcendence, a man who conquered himself. Carving him, however, was a feat that defied imagination. Shravanabelagola's granite hill, known as Vindhyagiri, rises nearly 400 feet into the sky. There were no cranes, no machines, only human hands, chisels, ropes, and an idea that refused to die. Ancient records hint that vast ramps of packed earth were built around the hill, layer by layer, so the sculptors could reach every part of the statue. They worked for years, perhaps decades, guided only by geometry, intuition, and faith. Every strike of the chisel echoed across the valley, not as labor, but as prayer. When it was finally complete, the hill itself seemed to exhale, as though the stone had waited millennia to take this form. The statue was consecrated with a ritual unlike any other, the Mahamastakabhisheka, a ceremony so grand it takes place only once every 12 years. Even today, monks and pilgrims gather from across the world, climbing scaffolds to pour milk, saffron, sandalwood, and liquid gold over Bahubali's head. As the sun glints off the flowing streams of color, it's said that for a brief moment, the titan breathes again, stone coming alive beneath rivers of faith. Archaeologists who have studied Gomachwara call it a marvel of engineering. The precision of its symmetry is near mathematical, the expression, timeless. And yet, the true mystery lies not in its construction, but in its message. Bahubali stands unclothed, unarmed, unguarded, a being stripped of everything worldly. His silence speaks of victory over desire, over ego, over the need to conquer anything but the self. Beneath the statue, inscriptions whisper forgotten names, kings, poets and travelers who stood here long before us. Some are carved in ancient Kannada, others in Tamil and Sanskrit, proof that this place was once a meeting ground of cultures and beliefs. Local legends even speak of a hidden chamber sealed within the hill, said to hold the relics of Jain saints or perhaps Chavandaraya himself. But it has never been opened. The mystery, like the silence of Bahubali, remains sacred. Over 1,000 years, storms have lashed against this hill. Dynasties have risen and fallen. The Gangas, the Hoysalas, the Vijayanagara Empire, all turned to dust. Yet Bahubali endures, unchanged. When rain falls, droplets cling to his face like tears that never move. When the sun sets, his shadow stretches over Shravanabelagola like a quiet blessing. Travelers who stand before him often describe an odd feeling, not awe, not fear, but peace. As if, in his presence, time itself slows down. Because Gomachwara is not a monument to power. He is a reminder of surrender, of the strength it takes to let go. The vines around his legs are not decay, they are rebirth. They remind us that stillness is not the absence of life, but the highest form of it. Every 12 years, when the next consecration arrives, thousands gather again at his feet. The chants rise, the drums echo across the valley, and once more, saffron and milk flow down his stone body. For those moments, it feels as if the ancient sculptors are still here, their spirit alive in the rhythm of the ritual, in the silence that follows. As twilight fades and the crowds disperse, the hill returns to its quiet. Below, the town lights flicker like fireflies. Above, the giant watches, unmoving, unending. 1,000 years ago, human hands carved stone into stillness, and that stillness became eternal. The Gomachwara of Shravanabelagola stands not as a relic of faith, but as a mirror, reflecting the calm we have forgotten in our restless world. For those who climb the hill, the message is clear, whispered through granite and time. The greatest victory is not to rule the world, but to master oneself. The poet who became stone. The Thiruvalluvar of Kanyakumari. India, the Thiruvalluvar statue. At the southernmost edge of India, where two seas and an ocean meet, stands a figure carved against the sky, calm, silent, and eternal. The waves crash at his feet, the winds howl through the salt air, and the gulls circle endlessly around his stone crown. He faces the horizon, his gaze locked on the infinite, as if speaking not to the world, but to time itself. This is Thiruvallur, the ancient poet-sage of Tamil Nadu, reborn in stone, towering 133 feet above the restless waters of Kanyakumari. Here, at the confluence of the Bay of Bengal, the Arabian Sea, and the Indian Ocean, his statue stands on a rocky islet, a bridge between earth and eternity. To those who visit, it feels less like approaching a monument, and more like stepping into a dream, one shaped by philosophy, myth, and the endless rhythm of the sea. Thiruvallur lived more than 2,000 years ago, a poet so mysterious that history itself could never quite pin down who he truly was. Some say he was a weaver, others a saint, a philosopher, or even a quiet rebel who distilled the wisdom of humanity into just 1,330 couplets, verses known as the Thirukkural. It is a book older than kingdoms, broader than religions, a guide to virtue, wealth, love, and truth, that transcends every boundary humans have built. And now, in Kanyakumari, that wisdom has taken form in granite. The statue was envisioned in the late 20th century, a dream to give shape to Tamil Nadu's greatest thinker, one who belonged to all humankind. It was sculpted under the guidance of Dr. V. Ganapati Stapati, a master architect whose ancestors had once built the great Brihadeswarar temple at Thanjavur. But this time, the temple was the sea, and the stone itself was to hold philosophy. To bring Thiruvallur to life, workers hauled more than 7,000 tons of stone onto a rocky island battered by waves. Each block had to be carried by barge, fitted with precision, and bound to withstand centuries of wind and salt. Thousands of artisans, engineers, and divers worked in shifts, often suspended between ocean and sky, as storms rolled across the horizon. Every strike of the chisel echoed not just as labor, but as tribute. The design itself carries meaning deeper than most realize. The statue's height, 133 feet, corresponds to the 133 chapters of the Thirukkural. He stands on a 38-foot pedestal, representing the 38 chapters devoted to virtue. His right hand points skyward, not in pride, but in teaching, as if reminding us that the highest truths are not found in power, but in conduct. His left hand rests by his side, steady and calm, symbolizing detachment from the chaos of the world below. From a distance, the statue looks motionless, but up close, the artistry is alive. Every strand of hair, every fold of his garment, every vein on his hand meticulously carved. When dawn breaks over Kanyakumari, the sun rises behind him, turning his silhouette into gold. When dusk falls, the waves crash beneath his feet, glowing silver under the moonlight. He stands unmoved, the eternal teacher between two infinities. Yet the story of this monument is not just of stone, it is of struggle. Construction began in 1990, but fierce winds, unpredictable tides, and political obstacles delayed it for years. Some called it impossible, others called it unnecessary. But the workers, many of them simple fishermen, believed otherwise. They said they were not building a statue, they were setting the poet back upon the waves. Finally, on January 1st, 2000, as the new millennium dawned, the statue was completed and consecrated. The sound of conch shells, temple bells, and chants filled the sea air. The waves lapped the rock like applause. A poet from the 1st century had found his voice again, this time through stone. Today, when travelers approach Kanyakumari, the first thing they see is the giant silhouette rising from the ocean mist, the poet watching over the meeting of the three seas. To his side stands the Vivekananda Rock Memorial, honoring another teacher who sought the unity of mankind. Together they form an ancient dialogue between wisdom and awakening, between thought and action. Those who stand at the edge of the mainland often describe a feeling they can't quite explain. The air seems charged, the sea endless, the statue both near and unreachable. As waves crash and retreat, it's as if Thiruvallur is whispering through the roar of the ocean that no matter how vast the world becomes, the heart of humanity remains the same. His message, carved not in ink but in granite, endures. To walk in virtue is greater than to conquer a kingdom. The statue, like his verses, asks no devotion, only reflection. It does not tower in arrogance but in calm. It reminds every onlooker that truth can stand even against the tide, and when storms rage across Kanyakumari, lightning flashes over the poet's face, and thunder rolls through the sky, the waves still break softly at his feet, as though even nature pauses before him. The Thiruvallur statue is not merely a monument, it is a meditation carved into stone, a bridge between past and future, and a symbol of a civilization that understood one timeless truth. Greatness does not roar, it stands silent, yet eternal. And as you watch the waves swirl around his granite feet, you realize that the poet who once wrote of virtue and wisdom now lives through silence and endurance, his voice carried not by words but by the wind and the sea itself. The silent giant of Hainan, the spring temple Buddha. In the heart of China's Hainan province, surrounded by mountains and whispers of ancient dynasties, stands a figure so immense it seems less carved by human hands and more placed there by the earth itself. Rising from the mist like a vision, the Spring Temple Buddha gazes silently over the valley, serene, motionless, and eternal. At over 500 feet tall, it is one of the tallest statues ever created by humankind, yet it exudes not power, but peace. Here, in the remote town of Jiaokun, the air carries a strange stillness. Monks move slowly along the temple grounds, their chants echoing between the cliffs. Pilgrims climb hundreds of steps, each one bringing them closer not to heaven, but to humility. For in the shadow of the Spring Temple Buddha, every human breath feels small, and every silence feels sacred. The story of this colossal statue begins not in the present, but in memory. It was conceived during the 1990s, a time when China sought to celebrate its spiritual heritage and architectural might. Inspired by the ancient Vairocana Buddha of Longmen, this new monument would be built to embody both compassion and cosmic power, a symbol that would bridge the worlds of earth and divinity. The chosen site was no accident. At the base of Mount Yao, where natural hot springs flow from the rocks, builders found a location said to hold the breath of the dragon. The spring that gives the temple its name was believed to have healing powers, its steam rising like incense into the cold mountain air. And so, the statue that would rise here was designed not merely as stone and metal, but as a spiritual beacon, a reminder that peace, like the water below, flows endlessly when undisturbed. Construction began in 1997, and what followed was a feat that blurred the line between devotion and engineering. Thousands of workers, engineers, and artisans worked day and night to assemble this vision of enlightenment. The statue itself was crafted from 1,100 pieces of copper, each plated in gold, a shimmering skin that catches the dawn and reflects it across the valley. Beneath the surface lies a skeleton of steel and bronze, capable of withstanding earthquakes, storms, and centuries. From a distance, the Buddha appears tranquil, eyes half closed, face bathed in calm. But up close the detail is breathtaking. The folds of his robe flow like water, every gesture precise, every curve deliberate. His right hand is raised in a Paya Mudra, a gesture of protection, a silent message that says, "Fear not." His left hand rests gently on his knee, an anchor to the earth, symbolizing compassion and patience. The platform beneath him, known as the Throne of the Lotus, is itself an architectural wonder, a temple within a temple. Beneath it lies a vast hall filled with carved deities, ancient sutras, and gold-lined relics that glow softly in the candlelight. Visitors who enter describe the feeling not as awe, but as surrender. The deeper they walk, the quieter the world becomes, until all that remains is the steady hum of prayer wheels and the faint murmur of the spring. When completed in 2008, the Spring Temple Buddha stood 502 feet tall, resting upon a massive pedestal shaped like a lotus flower, bringing its full height to nearly 682 feet, if counted with the surrounding structure. It towered over the nearby villages, not as a monument of dominance, but of endurance. For centuries, the Buddha has been a symbol of peace in a world of chaos, a face that has watched over empires rise and fall. But there's a hidden story behind its creation, one not written in stone, but whispered among historians. Some believe the statue's conception was partly symbolic, a quiet response to the destruction of ancient Buddhist monuments elsewhere in Asia. It was said to remind the world that wisdom and faith cannot be erased, only reborn. Whether true or not, that story adds another layer of mystery to this already sacred giant. As the sun sets over Henan, the light turns golden, and the Buddha seems to come alive. Shadows move across his face like passing thoughts, and for a brief moment he appears to breathe. Birds circle his head, tiny specks against his colossal form, before disappearing into the amber sky. Below, monks light the evening lamps, their flicker reflecting off the copper like stars on the ocean. To stand before the Spring Temple Buddha is to confront silence itself. The wind slows, thoughts fade, and even time feels suspended. You can almost feel the weight of centuries pressing down, not with oppression, but with grace. It's as though the mountains themselves bow slightly around him, acknowledging the presence of something greater than stone. The statue is not just a marvel of human construction, it's a conversation between matter and spirit, between engineering and enlightenment, between what can be built and what must be felt. And perhaps that's the greatest lesson this giant imparts, that no matter how high humanity climbs, the greatest height is not measured in feet, but in peace. Tonight, as the valley fades into mist and the final chants echo through the mountains, the Buddha remains, still, serene and watching. The world will change, the centuries will pass, but his golden gaze will endure, calm as ever, looking out across the endless horizon, waiting perhaps for us to finally understand. The Chacmul Giants, Mexico's silent messengers of the gods. In the heart of ancient Mexico, beneath jungles that whisper with the voices of forgotten gods, lies a mystery carved in stone, statues so strange, so deliberate, that they seem caught between the worlds of men and deities. They are the Chacmul statues, reclining figures with their heads turned sideways, holding bowls upon their stomachs. Silent, waiting and watching for over 1,000 years. But who were they, and what message did they guard for the gods? Our story begins in Chichen Itza, one of the greatest cities of the Maya civilization. Here, among pyramids aligned with the stars and temples that hum with sacred geometry, archaeologists found them, lifelike stone figures lying back on their elbows, gazing toward the horizon. Their faces are calm, their posture deliberate, as if frozen mid-ritual. Each one clutches a stone bowl or dish, believed to hold offerings of blood, incense, or hearts offered to the divine. Yet these statues weren't confined to one site. They appeared across Mexico, from Tula in the highlands, to Uxmal, to the distant reaches of Central America. Wherever ancient priests built temples, the chalk moles appeared, always in the same pose, always facing the same mysterious direction, toward the rising sun. For the Maya and the Toltecs, the sun wasn't just a celestial body, it was a god that lived and died each day. To ensure its rebirth, the people believed it needed nourishment, the life force of humans. And so the chalk mole may have served as the bridge, a divine messenger holding the offerings meant to keep the cosmos alive. But these weren't ordinary statues. Some were carved from single massive blocks of limestone, weighing several tons. Others were adorned with intricate jewelry, helmets, and glyphs that hinted at celestial origins. The way they recline, halfway between lying and sitting, has baffled historians. Were they modeled after real figures, or were they depictions of beings beyond our understanding? The Aztecs, centuries later, adopted the same iconography. They placed chalk moles at the entrances of temples, guardians of thresholds between the physical and spiritual realms. To pass one was to pass into sacred space. Some Spanish chroniclers even wrote of priests placing beating hearts in the stone bowls during rituals, offerings to Tlaloc, the god of rain and fertility. But what's fascinating is how uniform these figures were, separated by miles and centuries, yet carved in the same way. How did different cultures, Maya, Toltec, Aztec, inherit the same form without direct contact? Was it imitation or memory? In Tula, the ancient capital of the Toltecs, 4 massive warrior statues once stood atop the pyramid of Quetzalcoatl. At the base of that same pyramid, the chalk mole waited, his face weathered, his bowl empty. Local legends claim he represents a fallen messenger, half man, half god, who carried offerings between earth and heaven, and in death, he became eternal stone. When the Spanish arrived in the 16th century, they saw these figures and called them idols of demons. They smashed many, buried others, and burned the temples around them. But the chalk moles that survived continued their silent vigil, lying in the ruins, untouched by centuries of conquest. Even today, when you visit Chichen Itza, you can see one lying before the Temple of the Warriors, its expression calm, timeless, and unreadable. But there's a strange detail, one that still puzzles researchers. Some chalk moles were found far from temples, buried under plazas, inside hidden chambers, or deep beneath staircases. Why would a culture hide such sacred objects? One theory suggests they were buried intentionally, as if sealing away something too powerful to be seen. Others believe they were markers, part of a network of ritual points aligned with the stars, designed to channel energy across the land. Recent studies using LiDAR scanning in the Yucatan Peninsula revealed patterns connecting chalk mole sites along celestial lines, particularly to the Pleiades and Orion's belt, constellations sacred to Mesoamerican astronomers. Could these statues have served as receivers or transmitters of cosmic energy? Were they placed according to a forgotten science of alignment, where the heavens dictated the flow of ritual power on Earth? And then there's the question of their expression. Look closely, and you'll notice something. The chalk mole is neither joyful nor sad. It's waiting. The gaze is distant, the lips slightly parted, as though expecting something or someone. Ancient inscriptions describe them as those who rest before the gods, eternal servants who carry the weight of human prayers. Archaeologists have discovered traces of red pigment on several statues, evidence they were once painted, glowing under torchlight. Imagine standing in a temple as smoke filled the air, drums beat in rhythm with the heart, and flames flickered across a crimson-painted chalk mole. The bowl before him glows, the stone seems to breathe, and the night sky above is filled with stars, the same stars that guided their builders. As centuries passed, the jungle reclaimed these temples. Roots cracked through stone, vines wrapped around the reclining figures, and the chalk moles vanished from sight. Yet they endured, unbroken, unbowed, and when they were rediscovered, their mystery was as alive as ever. Some modern scholars suggest that the chalk mole represents Chalk, the Mayan rain god himself, captured in the moment of descent, resting between heaven and earth. Others believe they symbolize fallen warriors, guardians of sacred thresholds, but for the people who still live near these ruins, they are more than history, they are spirits that still watch over the land. Local elders in Yucatan tell stories of hearing whispers near the temples at night, of offerings mysteriously moved, of rain arriving only after incense is placed before the chacmol, coincidence, or continuity of an ancient pact. As dusk falls over Chichen Itza, the sun sinks behind the pyramid of Kukulkan. The light hits the chacmol's stone bowl one last time, a single beam reflecting across the temple courtyard, just as it did 1,000 years ago. For a few fleeting moments, it glows, and then, as darkness takes over, the statue fades back into shadow, as if sinking into another world. The chacmol remains, patient, eternal, and silent, watching civilizations rise and fall, waiting for the day the gods might return, or for us to remember what we once knew. Because in the stillness of stone lies a truth far older than words, a message carved not to be read, but to be felt. The Stone Kings of Naqsh Rustam, Iran's eternal guardians of the tomb. Beneath the blazing Persian sun, carved into the face of a mountain older than empires, stand 4 vast tombs, silent, towering, and eternal. This is Naqsh Rustam, the necropolis of ancient kings, where stone remembers what time has forgotten. For over 2,000 years, these monumental carvings have watched over the desert plains near Persepolis, their facades cut straight into the cliff, rising like windows into another world. But among them, deeper than myth, and more precise than memory, lie figures so vast, so hauntingly lifelike, that they blur the line between sculpture and resurrection. They call them the Stone Kings of Naqsh Rustam, colossal statues carved to guard the resting places of the ancient rulers of Persia. The Mountain of Kings. Our story begins with Darius the Great, the mighty Achaemenid emperor who once ruled a realm stretching from the Indus River to the Aegean Sea. Around 500 BC, he commanded his artisans to carve his tomb into a mountain, not as a monument of death, but as a declaration of eternity. What they created was unlike anything the world had ever seen, a vast cruciform tomb, high upon the rock, inaccessible except by ropes and scaffolds. At its center, a life-sized figure of Darius himself, standing upon a platform supported by conquered nations, his arms raised toward a winged symbol, Ahura Mazda, the divine lord of light. But what most visitors miss are the subtle forms, the colossal guardian figures hidden in the reliefs below, their faces eroded, yet unmistakably human. Some seem to hold weapons, others stand in silence, watching the tomb entrances. Were they mere symbols or something more? Echoes of forgotten giants. Later kings, Xerxes, Artax, Xerxes I and Darius II, followed his path, carving their own tombs into the same cliff face. Each one mirrors the same celestial geometry, the same height, the same alignment, facing the rising sun. Scholars believe these alignments were no accident, they were cosmic markers connecting the tombs with the heavens. But deeper legends whisper that Naqsh Rustam was not first built by the Persians at all. According to local lore, these mountain faces were shaped long before Darius, carved by giants who once ruled the earth. In ancient Persian myth, these were the Devovs, powerful beings of stone and fire who defied the gods and were cursed to sleep beneath the mountains. When the early Achaemenids arrived, it's said they found the cliffs already marked, half-carved figures, silent and strange. Instead of destroying them, Darius claimed them, reshaping the work of giants into tombs for kings. It's a story dismissed by archaeologists, yet one the locals still whisper. Because even today, in the rock faces surrounding the tombs, there are unfinished figures, massive chiseled outlines, and carvings that bear no resemblance to known Persian art. Who made them? And why do they match older Mesopotamian and Elamite styles, ones that predate Darius by centuries? The tombs that never sleep. Standing before Naqsh Rustam, the sheer scale of the tombs is almost unsettling. Each entrance is over 20 meters high. The reliefs, massive. The symmetry, flawless. Yet no mortal ever entered these tombs after burial. Once sealed, they were meant to remain untouched forever, watched over by those silent guardians carved in the stone. At the base of the cliff, later dynasties added their own marks. The Sasanian kings, more than 700 years later, returned to this sacred site and carved their own victories beneath the tombs. Here, you can still see giant equestrian figures, kings on horseback trampling enemies, watched by the same winged symbol above. To the Sassanids, Naqsh Rustam wasn't just a tomb, it was a portal to ancestral power. They believed the spirits of the old kings still lingered in the mountain. By carving their triumphs here, they were aligning themselves with divine legitimacy, rewriting history into the stone of eternity. But one carving stands out from the rest, a massive relief showing a king receiving the ring of power from a celestial figure. Beneath their feet lies a fallen enemy, possibly a Roman emperor. The message is clear, the mountain itself had become the throne of heaven, secrets beneath the rock. In recent years, archaeologists using ground-penetrating radar have detected hollow spaces behind some of the tomb facades, chambers that have never been opened. Could they hold treasures, texts, or remains long thought lost? Or could these voids be ancient tunnels, part of a hidden network used during royal burials? Some believe the tombs were connected by subterranean passages, now sealed by earthquakes and time. Ancient Persian inscriptions refer to the passage of the dead, suggesting that rituals continued underground long after the tombs were sealed. Even more intriguing, traces of pigments were found on the carvings. Once these massive reliefs may have been painted in vivid blues and reds. Imagine the cliffs glowing under torchlight, the kings of Persia alive again in color, their eyes reflecting the fire of ritual. The face of Rustam. The site's name, Naksha Rustam, means picture of Rustam. Rustam, in Persian legend, was a hero of impossible strength, the son of a mortal and a supernatural being. But why name a royal necropolis after him? Some believe that one of the oldest, most eroded reliefs on the cliff, a bearded figure wielding a mace, was mistaken for Rustam himself. Others think it was deliberate, that later generations saw these carvings, forgotten and mysterious, and believed they must depict the hero. But another interpretation is far older, that Rustam himself was based on these carvings. That the myth of the giant hero came after the mountain, not before, that people saw the immense figures carved with godlike power, and imagined a being strong enough to have made them. When stone speaks. Stand here at sunset, and you'll see the tombs glow gold against the desert. The shadows of the carved kings stretch across the plain, reaching toward Persepolis, the once great capital, just a few kilometers away. The alignment is perfect. When the solstice sun sets, it illuminates the center of Darius's tomb, the figure of the king himself, bathed in the last light of the dying day. To the Persians, this wasn't coincidence, it was cosmic design. Life, death, and eternity were one unbroken circle, written not on paper, but into the mountain itself. Even now, thousands of years later, Naksha Rustam remains untouched. The tombs are sealed, the kings asleep, but the guardians endure, their features fading, their eyes hollow, yet their presence undiminished. Visitors often describe a strange feeling standing before the cliff, a silence that isn't empty but alive, a sense that you are being watched, not with menace but memory. Perhaps that's what these carvings were meant to do, to remind us that empires crumble, languages fade, and time devours all, but stone remembers, because in the heart of Iran, carved into a mountain once touched by kings, the past still breathes, and the watchers of Naksha Rustam still stand guard, eternal, solemn, and unblinking.